So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Tsunade. So let's start the series. The air didn't just crackle, it screamed. Not with sound, but with a fundamental wrongness that vibrated in Naruto Uzumaki's molars and made the nine tails snarl in the back of his skull like a chain being dragged across stone. One moment, he'd been on the training grounds just beyond Konoha's eastern wall, the late afternoon sun painting everything in honey gold, the smell of pine and damp earth filling his lungs as he dodged a playful, yet still bone-shattering, swing from Tsunade's fist. They'd been sparring, or rather, he'd been pestering her into it after catching her sneaking back from another, short trip, that reeked of sake and lost bets. The next, the sky tore. It didn't split with thunder. It frayed, like rotten fabric giving way. A jagged seam of impossible purple-black ripped open directly above them, silent and profound. The sun didn't disappear, it was erased from that patch of sky, replaced by a swirling bruise that pulsed with a rhythm that made Naruto's stomach lurch. The cheerful birdsong of the forest choked off mid-note. Then, they fell out. Or oozed. Or were birthed. Things. Not Akatsuki. Not Otsutsuki. Not anything from any bingo book or legend he'd been forced to study. A samurai's ornate, lacquered armor stumbled forward, but where limbs should be, there were only thick, root-like tendons, pulsing with a viscous, dark fluid. It clutched a sword that was more like a giant, rusted tooth, weeping a substance that sizzled where it hit the grass. Another creature skittered on too many jointed legs, its body a translucent sack filled with swirling gray smoke, with at least a dozen mismatched eyes, human, animal, insect, all weeping the same silver, oily tears. The smell hit Naruto like a physical blow, ozone, sharp and electric, layered over the cloying sweetness of rotting lilies, undercut by the metallic tang of blood that hadn't yet dried. It was a smell that didn't belong in a living world. The very ground protested their presence. Lush green grass grayed and curled into brittle ash in spreading patches beneath their feet, the decay whispering outward with a sound like rice paper burning. What the hell is this, brat? Tsunade's voice was a whip crack beside him, all traces of her earlier, sake-flushed annoyance vaporized by the deadly calm of the fifth Hokage. Her Hokage Haori was already off, thrown carelessly over a nearby log. Her famous, emerald-lined coat followed, leaving her in the simple mesh armor and wrap shirt. The diamond seal on her forehead glimmered with a gathered light, a tiny, focused sun against the spreading gloom. How should I know? Naruto shot back, his body moving on instinct before his mind could fully process the surreal horror. A Rasengan spiraled to life in his right palm, its familiar, high-pitched were a comforting song against the dissonant, clicking moans of the invaders. He didn't give them a chance to approach. They don't look like good listeners. He burst forward, a blur of orange and blue. The root samurai turned its faceless helm toward him. Naruto drove the Rasengan into its chest plate. The impact wasn't the clean, explosive detonation he expected. The lacquered armor screamed, a high, ceramic shriek, and then melted, not into liquid, but into a dozen jagged, spear-like shards that lashed out. He twisted, but not fast enough. One grazed his forearm, slicing through the fabric of his jacket. The pain was instant and wrong, a deep, invasive cold that bit through muscle and seemed to suck the warmth directly from his bones. It left a trail of numbness in its wake, his chakra stuttering around the wound like a sputtering flame. Their energy. It's anti-chakra. Tsunade's bellow cut through the chaos. She didn't use fancy techniques. She simply stepped into the path of the multi-legged eye sac and punched. The air compacted with a THWOM. The creature didn't so much explode as disintegrate into a cloud of that greasy smoke and a shower of gelatinous eye matter. The fragments that hit the ground writhed like salted slugs before dissolving. Don't let it touch your core. It seeks to negate, to unravel. Anti-chakra? The concept was so absurd, so contrary to everything he was, that a hysterical laugh almost bubbled out of him. Almost. Kurama's growl in his mindscape was not one of anger, but of primal, instinctual revulsion. This energy, it's not just foreign, boy. It's empty. A hunger. It doesn't have its own nature. It exists to consume, to devour light like ours. It wants to make everything, still. Naruto flipped backward, landing in a crouch beside Tsunade. The smell was now a thick miasma, clinging to the back of his throat. He could hear the wet, squelching steps of more shapes emerging from the forest's edge, drawn to their vibrant chakra like moths to a deadly flame. The rip in the sky pulsed, birthing another distortion, a floating, jellyfish-like mass of tendrils that emitted a low, subaudible hum that made his teeth ache. We need to close that thing, he yelled, pointing at the tear. One big hit. Before more come through. Tsunade's amber eyes, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, scanned the battlefield. She saw the numb gray patch on his arm, saw the way the gloom creatures moved toward them with single-minded hunger. Her mind, the mind of the greatest medic Nin and a veteran of 2 wars, calculated odds, vectors, chakra expenditure. My reserves aren't at your bottomless well level, idiot, she snapped, but there was no heat in it, only fierce focus. A standard combo won't cut it. We need a fusion. A big one. I have a theoretical, a medical ninjutsu pushed to its offensive extreme. But it needs a power source I don't have. She looked at him, and in that glance was the absolute trust of a commander to her ultimate weapon, and the terrifying gamble of a medic betting on an unstable reagent. Can you give me everything? Not a controlled stream. The floodgates. A wild, reckless grin split Naruto's face, cutting through the cold fear. This was it. The big play. Believe it. Then follow my lead. Don't think, just pour. She brought her hands together not in a standard combat seal, but in the complex, interwoven finger structure of the most advanced healing arts, the Genesis Rebirth seal, but inverted, its purpose twisted from creation to focused annihilation. I'll channel it through the Byakugo. My body will be the cannon. You be the powder keg. It was a gloriously insane plan. Her precise, finely tuned chakra system, the pinnacle of human medical science, acting as a conduit for his raw, volcanic, beast-infused energy. The risk was catastrophic, her pathways could burn out, her cells could vaporize from the inside. The trust it implied was absolute, terrifying, and exhilarating. He moved behind her, not hesitating. He placed his right palm flat against the small of her back, over her spine. Even through the mesh armor, he could feel the incredible, dense network of her chakra, not a river, but a superhighway of refined energy, layered with countless fail-safes and reservoirs. It hummed with a potent, green-gold life force that made his own feel like a roaring, untamed wildfire. Ready, she barked, her voice strained already with the effort of holding the inverted seal. Naruto closed his eyes. He didn't open a valve. He blew the dam. Golden chakra, and alive, torrented from his palm. It was tinged with the violent, sanguine red of Kurama's will. It crashed into Tsunade's system. She gasped, a sharp, punched-out sound that held more pain than any scream. Her body went rigid as a bowstring. The diamond on her forehead didn't just glow, it erupted into a beacon of white light so intense it cast stark, jumping shadows across the clearing. Lichtenberg figures of blazing chakra traced up her neck, down her arms, mapping her entire circulatory system in fire. She trembled violently, every muscle corded, holding back the apocalyptic energy with sheer, monumental willpower. Sweat evaporated from her skin the instant it formed, leaving a faint, salty crust. Naruto could feel her trembling through his palm, a vibration like a mountain about to quake. Her voice, when it came, was layered, resonant, her own commanding tone woven with the deep, echoing timbre of Naruto's and the guttural edge of the Nine Tails. Mystical palm art, Genesis canon. She thrust her palms forward. What emerged wasn't a beam of destruction. It was a lance of compressed creation. A spiraling column of gold and verdant green, so dense it warped the light around it, humming with the sound of a million hummingbirds. It didn't tear through the air, it healed the air it passed through, leaving a temporary trail of hyperoxygenated, scintillating clarity. It struck the heart of the dimensional rip. There was no explosion. Instead, a profound, silent reweaving occurred. The frayed, bleeding edges of reality stitched themselves back together with threads of brilliant light. The gloom creatures caught in the periphery didn't die, they were unmade. The root samurai unraveled into falling autumn leaves that turned to dust. The floating jellyfish dissolved into a brief, beautiful shower of luminescent plankton before winking out. The very concept of the anti-chakra was being overridden by a force of pure, overwhelming life. The rip shuddered. It was shrinking, knitting closed from the edges inward. But the entity behind the tear, the weaver, though they did not yet know its name, felt this defiance. This healing was an anathema to its nature. As the Genesis cannon did its work and the tear dwindled to a man-sized scar, a final, desperate retaliation shot forth. Not a tendril this time, but a single, perfected instrument, a needle. It was 10 feet long, wrought from solidified void, blacker than black, and cold in a way that hurt the eyes to look at. It moved with silent, inevitable precision, ignoring Tsunade's beam, aiming directly for the source of the disruptive power, for Naruto's heart. Naruto saw it, a streak of negative space in his vision. But he was locked in the output, his chakra flowing into Tsunade. To dodge would break the connection, collapse the cannon, leave the rip half open. He gritted his teeth, prepared to take the hit. He'd survive. He had to. Tsunade saw it too. In the span of a hummingbird's heartbeat, 1,000 calculations flickered through her mind, survival percentages, Konoha's strategic future, the cost of a Hokage's life weighed against the cost of the village's son, the mathematical certainty of his higher survival odds. All of it was sterile data. It was the image of a grinning, whiskered face saying, "I'll be Hokage, believe it," that overrode everything. Her body moved before the tactical thought finished. With a grunt of immense effort, she wrenched herself slightly to the side, breaking the perfect alignment of the cannon for a fraction of a second, and shoved Naruto backward with her left elbow. The Genesis cannon flickered. The needle, deflected from its lethal course, pierced clean through the meat of her right shoulder. There was no spray of blood. The needle was a conduit. It injected. A blot of profound, light-eating darkness shot into the wound and instantly blossomed through her chakra network like ink in water. It was cold. A cold that burned, that froze her chakra pathways solid in an expanding web of necrosis. It wasn't poison. It was the absence of life, made manifest. Tsunade's scream was ripped from her throat, a raw, animal sound of utter violation that had nothing to do with physical pain and everything to do with a healer feeling her very life force being corrupted. The Genesis cannon sputtered and died. The rip in the sky froze, half-closed, a sickly, pulsing wound. Tsunade. The world narrowed. The smells, the sounds, the other creatures, all of it vanished. There was only her, staggering, the black web visible under her skin, crawling toward her heart and her forehead seal. And the needle, still embedded, humming with vile energy. Rage. Not the hot, quick anger of a fight, but a cold, incandescent fury that began in Kurama's cage and flooded every cell of Naruto's body. The air around him warped. A single crimson tail of chakra erupted, then 3, then 6, whipping around him with enough force to tear up the earth. The red, corrosive cloak of the Nine Tails chakra mode enveloped him, his eyes slitting into feral red. He didn't form a Rasengan. He became vengeance. He lunged, not for Tsunade, but for the tendril of gloom stuff that still connected the needle to the half-closed rift. His chakra-clawed hands, steaming with corrosive energy, gripped the void-black cord. The sensation was agony. It was the feeling of every cell in his hands dying, freezing, and being unmade all at once. It was the static scream of absolute zero. He roared, a sound that was part Uzumaki, part demon fox, and all defiance. Get out of our world. He pulled. Not with muscle, but with will. He poured every ounce of his stubborn, unbreakable spirit, every scrap of Kurama's hatred for this foreign invader, into the act of severing this connection. The golden chakra of his own life force flared against the black, a desperate, shining resistance. With a sound that was less a noise and more a sudden, profound absence of pressure, a universe sighing, the cord snapped. The release sent a shockwave of distorted reality outward. The half-closed rip sealed instantly with a sound like a vault door slamming shut. The remaining gloom creatures in the clearing simply ceased to be, as if they were drawings wiped from a page. Silence descended, heavy and thick. The only sounds were Tsunade's ragged, wet breathing, the sizzle of dying gloom energy evaporating from Naruto's scorched hands, and the frantic drumbeat of his own heart. The red chakra cloak vanished. Naruto stumbled, the backlash of sudden adrenaline drop and chakra depletion hitting him. He ignored it. He scrambled to her side on hands and knees. She was on one knee, her left hand braced on the ground, her right arm hanging uselessly. The needle was gone, but the damage remained, a spiderweb of black veins radiating from a central, star-shaped wound on her shoulder. Her skin was clammy and pale, a sickly gray-green. Her eyes, when they met his, were wide with pain and a shock that went deeper than the physical, but they were lucid. Furious. "You, stupid, reckless, brat," she gritted out, each word a struggle. "You let your guard down. Like a genin. Shut up. Don't talk." His voice was raw. His own hands were blistered and numb, but he reached for her, his mind screaming for Sakura, for Katsuyu, for any solution. "I'm getting you to Sakura right now. Just hold on." But the severed needle tendril on the ground between them was not inert. It twitched, a final death throe. It dissolved not into smoke, but into a pool of shimmering, mercury-like liquid that reflected not the returning sunlight, but that sickly green other sky. From it rose a wisp of coalesced intent, a ghostly, multi-layered voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds, bypassing their ears. It was the echo of the Weaver, its final edict. Prize, claimed, by victor. The balance, of loss, must be kept. The black corruption on Tsunade flared with a painful, inner light. At the same moment, a faint, almost invisible thread of golden light, no thicker than a hair, snapped into visibility. It connected Naruto's chest to Tsunade's wound. Naruto recognized the energy signature instantly. It was the residual chakra from the Rasengan he'd landed on her during their spar, the one that had technically, playfully made him the winner of their bout just before the world tour. A silly, inconsequential trickle of energy, now magnified and twisted by the gloom's logic. A life pulled from the weave, must be replaced in the pattern. The winner takes the prize, into the gloom. The voice faded. The pool of mercury light expanded rapidly, not across the ground, but upwards, like a reverse waterfall, swallowing their vision. Naruto. Tsunade's hand shot out, not in a gesture of weakness, but with the last of her formidable strength, her fingers clamping around his wrist like a vice. It wasn't a plea for salvation. It was an anchor. A demand. You got me into this. You see it through. The world around them, the scorched training ground, the familiar trees of Konoha, the blessed blue of the sky, began to dissolve. It didn't fade or darken. It pixelated into millions of fragments of gray and beige static, the sounds of the forest dying into a flat, dimensionless hum. And through that dissolving reality, a new world bled in, imposed itself with terrible clarity. Jagged, charcoal-black spires clawed at a perpetually twilit sky the color of a fresh bruise, streaked with sour green auroras. A cold, damp wind carried the smell of wet stone, deep earth, and something else, something old and metallic, like a forgotten coin at the bottom of a well. The air was thick, pressing on their eardrums. The silence here was absolute, and it was louder than any battlefield. The transition was complete. Naruto Uzumaki and Tsunade Senju, Hokage of Konoha, knelt not on soft grass, but on hard, slick flagstones in the shadow of an impossible tower, in a world that hungered for their light. The prize had been claimed. The adventure, in all its terrifying, horrific, and unpredictable glory, had begun with a losing hand. Chapter 2, A Kingdom of Rot. The first thing Tsunade did was vomit. It wasn't the pain, though that was a white-hot brand of wrongness spreading from her shoulder. It was the sensory overload. The transition hadn't been a gentle fade, it was a brutal cut and paste from a world of vibrant life to one of stagnant decay. Her legendary chakra control, usually a precise scalpel, recoiled violently from the ambient energy. Where the air in their world had been a canvas for chakra, here it was a thick, congealing soup of something, inert. Anti-chakra wasn't just a projectile, it was the atmosphere. Naruto, still gripping her arm, felt the world tilt. The gravity was off, not lighter or heavier, but skewed, as if they were standing on a slight slope that his inner ear refused to acknowledge. The silence was a physical presence. No insects, no wind through leaves, no distant village sounds. Just a low, subaudible hum that came from the stones themselves, a vibration that made his teeth feel loose. "Bachan," he said, his voice too loud in the quiet. He helped her sit back against the damp base of the spire. Her face was the color of old parchment. "Your shoulder." "I'm aware," she snapped, but the venom was weak, diluted by a shudder she couldn't suppress. She looked at the black web crawling toward her collarbone. With a grimace of concentration, she formed a shaky one-handed seal with her left hand and pressed it to the wound. Green medical chakra flickered around her fingertips. The moment it touched the black corruption, it sparked and died with a sound like grease hitting a hot pan. She hissed in pain and snatched her hand back. "It's rejecting healing chakra. Actively consuming it." "Let me try," Naruto said, his own hand still raw. He focused, pulling on Kurama's energy, not for a cloak, but for the pure, potent life force the fox represented. A warm, gold glow enveloped his palm. He reached for her shoulder. "Wait, you oaf, don't just," she started, but he'd already made contact. The reaction was immediate and violent. The black veins twisted, constricting like startled snakes. Tsunade cried out, a short, sharp sound she bit off at the end. The gold chakra wasn't consumed, it was attacked. Thin, hair-like filaments of darkness lashed out from the wound, trying to crawl up Naruto's chakra and into his hand. He yanked back, severing the connection. On his palm, over his existing blisters, 3 thin, gray lines now smoked faintly, numb and dead. "It's not just anti-chakra," Naruto breathed, staring at his hand. "It's alive. And it's hungry." "Told you," Kurama grumbled, a note of vindictive satisfaction in the psychic growl. "This place is a stomach. And you just dropped right into it." Tsunade was breathing in short, controlled bursts, mastering the pain. "We need to assess. Now. This isn't a standard battlefield. Intelligence is our only asset." Her Hokage persona was slamming back into place, a suit of armor over the agony. "Sight, sound, smell. Report." Naruto forced himself to look away from her wound and up. They were in some kind of courtyard, surrounded by structures that defied logic. The spires weren't built, they looked grown, or extruded, like gigantic, petrified thorns. Their surfaces were unnaturally smooth in places, pitted and porous in others, weeping a thin, clear fluid that smelled of alum and salt. Between them, the sky was a permanent twilight, the green auroras moving sluggishly, casting a sickly, pulsing light that made shadows twitch and crawl. There were no stars. The ground was paved with massive, hexagonal flagstones, but they were cracked and uneven, filled with a phosphorescent moss that gave off a faint, blue-gray glow. The air temperature was a constant, damp chill that seeped through his jacket. He could hear his own heartbeat, Tsunade's labored breathing, and water. A slow, rhythmic drip from somewhere high above. Plink, plink, plink. Each drop echoed in the profound stillness. It's like a dead person's bones, Naruto muttered. Everything's cold and wrong. And it's so quiet it hurts my ears. Smell? Tsunade prompted, her eyes scanning the openings between the spires, dark archways leading into deeper blackness. Naruto inhaled carefully. Wet rock. That weird metal smell. And something sweet. Like overripe fruit just starting to turn. Decomposition, Tsunade corrected, her voice flat. But not organic. Spiritual decay. She tried to push herself up with her good arm, wobbled, and Naruto was there, slipping a shoulder under her left arm. She didn't thank him, but she didn't refuse the support. Her weight was substantial, solid. We can't stay here. This courtyard is a kill box. We need cover. That archway, the one with the least drippage. They moved, a slow, lurching shuffle. Every sound they made, the scuff of Naruto's sandals, the rasp of Tsunade's breathing, seemed blasphemously loud. As they passed a pool of stagnant water collected in a flagstone's depression, Naruto glimpsed their reflection. He looked pale, his whisker marks stark. Tsunade looked ghostly, the black corruption a grotesque tattoo on her skin. The reflection also showed the green sky above them, but it was moving in the wrong direction, swirling counter to the real auroras. Don't look at the reflections, Tsunade said softly, having seen it too. They're not accurate. They reached the archway. The darkness within was absolute. Naruto formed a small, basic Rasengan, not for attack, but for light. Its blue-white whirl cast frantic, jumping shadows on the slick walls of a narrow, descending corridor. The walls here were different, ridged, almost organic, like the interior of a giant worm's gullet. Chakra use is a beacon here, Tsunade warned, her voice a whisper. But we have no choice. Go slow. The corridor sloped down. The air grew colder, the smell of wet stone intensifying, mixed now with a new odor, a dry, papery scent, like an ancient library. The dripping faded, replaced by a new sound, a faint, rhythmic scratching, like quills on parchment, coming from up ahead. Naruto's grip on Tsunade tightened. They rounded a gentle curve. The corridor opened into a chamber. It was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness above the reach of the Rasengan's light. And it was filled with scribes. At least 24 humanoid figures sat at stone desks, hunched over endless scrolls that unfurled across the floor. They were emaciated, their skin stretched taut over bone, the color of dusty vellum. They wore tattered, gray robes. They had no eyes, only smooth, blank skin where eyes should be. Their hands ended in long, sharpened bone styluses, which they used to scratch incessantly at the scrolls. The scrolls weren't paper, they were thin, dried membrane, and the ink was a black, tarry substance that oozed from the scribe's own bony fingertips. They took no notice of the newcomers. The only sound was the relentless, maddening scratch scratch scratch. What are they doing? Naruto whispered, horrified. Tsunade's medical mind tried to analyze. Recording. Or transcribing. Look at the scrolls. Naruto edged the light closer to a desk. The symbols weren't any language he knew. They were chaotic, spiraling, nonsensical. But as he watched, the symbols seemed to squirm, to rearrange themselves momentarily into familiar shapes, the Konoha leaf insignia, the Senju clan symbol, a stylized fox face, before dissolving back into chaos. They're writing us, Tsunade breathed, her face grim. Our memories. Our identities. They're trying to file us away into this place's logic. As she spoke, one of the scribes near them stopped scratching. It slowly tilted its head. The blank skin of its face oriented toward the Rasengan's light, then toward the sound of Tsunade's voice. It stood up, its joints cracking like dry twigs. It made no sound, but all the other scratching in the chamber stopped at once. 24 blank faces turned toward the intruders. The standing scribe raised its bone stylus. It wasn't a weapon. It pointed at them, and then began to draw in the air. A line of sickly yellow light trailed from its tip, sketching a crude, glowing symbol in the darkness, a spiral with a line through it. The symbol pulsed. Naruto felt a sudden, violent tug in his gut. A memory, the taste of miso ramen from Ichiraku's, the warmth, the comfort, was being pulled from him. It felt like a physical thread being drawn out through his navel. He gasped, the Rasengan flickering. It's trying to extract our experiences. Tsunade snarled. Don't let it focus. Break the symbol. Naruto didn't need telling. The violation was more intimate than any physical attack. With a yell of pure outrage, he hurled the Rasengan not at the scribe, but at the glowing symbol hanging in the air. The Rasengan hit it and detonated with a spectacular shower of blue sparks. The symbol shattered like glass. The scribe recoiled as if struck, a thin, wheezing shriek escaping its lipless mouth. The other scribes remained motionless. But the damage was done. The light, the noise, the chakra flare, it was a dinner bell. From the darkness above, a new sound emerged. A leathery flutter. Dozens of them. Move. Tsunade shoved Naruto forward, her own survival instinct overriding her injury. They stumbled deeper into the chamber, away from the corridor they came from. The scribes did not pursue, but simply sat back down and resumed their scratching, the brief interruption already forgotten. The fluttering descended. They were not bats. They were hands. Severed, human-sized hands, with elongated, spidery fingers, connected to tattered wings of skin stretched between the digits. They swarmed silently, diving toward the source of the living chakra. Naruto formed another Rasengan, batting one away. It exploded into a cloud of dust and a puff of that dry, papery smell. But there were too many. One latched onto Tsunade's bad shoulder. She screamed, a raw sound of agony, as the hand's fingers dug into the black corruption, squeezing. The darkness seemed to flare in response, feeding on her pain. Get it off, she gritted out, trying to pry at it with her left hand. Naruto lunged, his own hand glowing with chakra. He grabbed the wrist of the flying hand and crushed it. The bones snapped like brittle sticks, and the hand fell away, dissolving. But two more took its place, grabbing at her hair, her arm. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through Naruto. They were being overwhelmed in the dark. He needed space. He needed light. You'll draw every rotten thing in this crypt down on us, Kurama warned. We're already on the menu. Naruto screamed back internally. He stopped running. He planted his feet, pulling Tsunade behind him as best he could. He slammed his palms together. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen clones erupted in a cloud of smoke. The flying hands hesitated, confused by the sudden multiplication of chakra signatures. Scatter. Distract them, he ordered. The clones nodded, whooping and hollering, racing in different directions, some throwing kunai, others forming tiny Rasengans. The swarm of hands split, pursuing the decoys. It bought them 10 seconds. There. Tsunade pointed with her chin. Across the scribe chamber was another, smaller archway, partially hidden behind a massive stone lectern. They ran, Naruto half carrying her. They burst through the archway into a narrower, ascending tunnel. The sound of fluttering and the clones' distant yells faded behind them. They didn't stop until the tunnel leveled out and they found a shallow recess in the wall. Naruto let Tsunade slide down to sit, both of them panting. He let the clones disperse, absorbing their experiences, brief, terrifying flashes of being swarmed, dissolved, unmade by the flying hands. He shuddered. Silence again, broken only by their gasps. They were lost, wounded, in a world that wanted to dissect their very souls. Tsunade looked at him in the gloom, her face slick with sweat. The clones, good thinking. It was the closest to a compliment she'd given since they arrived. Naruto managed a weak grin. Yeah, well. Believe it. She didn't smile back. She was looking past him, down the tunnel. We need to find a source of water that isn't poison. Anne. I need to understand this corruption. If I can't heal it, I'll be a liability within hours. You're not a liability, Naruto said fiercely. I am if I can't throw a punch, she shot back, her pride a brittle thing. She closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the cold stone. We need a plan, Naruto. A real one. Not just running and reacting. Naruto sat beside her, the adrenaline crash making his limbs feel heavy. He looked at his hands, the blisters from the gloom tendril, the thin gray lines from trying to heal her. He felt a crushing sense of responsibility. This was his fault. His victory had pulled her here. I'll get us back, he said, his voice low but steady, echoing slightly in the stone tunnel. I don't know how. But I'll find a way. I promised I'd be Hokage. I can't do that if I get the last one killed in some rotten hand monkey dimension. Tsunade opened one eye. Hand monkey? You know what I mean. A faint, almost imperceptible snort escaped her. It wasn't a laugh, but it was something. First, we survive. Then, we find a way to fight back. Then, we go home. She listed it like a medical triage. Priority 1, secure a defensible position and gather data on this gloom. Priority 2, find a way to slow or halt this corruption. Priority 3, look for a way out, or a way to send a message. It was solid. Hokage-level thinking. Naruto clung to it. Okay. Okay. So we keep moving. Find a place to hole up. He stood, offering his hand. She looked at it, then at her own corrupted shoulder. She took his hand with her left, and he pulled her up. As they did, a new sound reached them, drifting from further up the tunnel. Not scratching. Not fluttering. It was the faint, lonely, discordant chime of a bell. Chapter 3, Ghosts in the Machine. The bell's chime was not a sound. It was a pressure change. A shift in the thick, gelid air that made Naruto's ears pop and Tsunade's corrupted shoulder throb in sympathetic dissonance. It wasn't a call to prayer, nor a warning. It was a punctuation mark in the silence of the tomb world, and it drew them forward not out of hope, but out of a terrible, gravitational curiosity. The ascending tunnel grew warmer, the dry papery smell of the scribe chamber giving way to something else, the scent of polished wood, worn leather, and the faint, acrid ghost of cheap tobacco. The walls here were no longer natural stone or organic ridges, they were built of mortared brick, uneven and weeping a dark, tarry moisture. The air hummed with a new energy, not the dead stillness of the spires, but a low, anxious buzz, like the collective murmur of a crowd just out of sight. This feels different, Naruto whispered, his voice barely carrying over the new ambient noise. Warmer. Like, a place people were. Or a place that remembers being one, Tsunade replied, her voice tight. The black veins had crept another inch toward her heart. Every movement of her right arm sent visible waves of sickly gray discoloration pulsing down to her fingertips. She held the arm cradled against her chest. Her breathing was more controlled now, a medic's discipline fighting the systemic shock. Stay alert. This could be a lure. The tunnel ended abruptly at a heavy, iron-bound door of dark oak. It was slightly ajar. Through the crack, a sliver of garish, pulsating light spilled out, golds, reds, and sickly greens, accompanied by a cacophony of layered sounds, the rhythmic clatter of spinning wood and ceramic, the tinny, off-key jingle of a mechanical tune, the low murmur of many voices, and over it all, a pervasive, rhythmic thump-thump-thump that Naruto felt in his sternum. He pushed the door open. The sight that greeted them was so jarringly, horrifically out of place that Naruto's brain simply refused to process it for a full 3 seconds. It was a gambling den. A vast, cavernous hall had been transformed into a grotesque parody of the casinos Tsunade had haunted across the Fire Country. Round felt-topped tables were crowded with patrons. Slot machines with ornate, gilded faces lined the walls, their reels spinning endlessly. A bar stretched along one side, stacked with bottles containing liquids that glowed with their own internal, bioluminescent light. Chandeliers made of thousands of fused, bleached bones dripped a flickering, phosphorescent fungus that cast long, dancing shadows. But the patrons, they were not people. They were silhouettes. Human-shaped voids of deeper darkness, flickering at the edges like bad reception. They had no faces, only smooth, obsidian planes, yet they moved with the jerky, exaggerated mannerisms of intense emotion, elation, despair, avarice. They slammed down cards, they pulled levers, they raised glasses of glowing liquor to where mouths should be. The murmur was the sound of their void, a susurrus of hollow static. And the dealers, the croupiers, they were the scribes. Or cousins to them. Just as emaciated, skin like parchment, but here they wore garish, moth-eaten tailcoats and top hats. Their blank faces were turned toward the games, their bone-stylus fingers dealing cards, spinning wheels, paying out piles of strange currency that glimmered like shattered glass. It's, Naruto stammered. My worst memory, Tsunade finished, her voice a dry whisper. Her face had lost all its remaining color. She wasn't looking at the horror of the scene, but at its terrible, intimate familiarity. The dragon's den in Tenzaku-gai. The layout, the placement of the high-stakes table by the pillar, it's exact. As she spoke, one of the shadowy patrons at a nearby roulette table lost. Its silhouette seemed to implode slightly, growing smaller, dimmer. With a sound like a sighing vacuum, it dissolved into a wisp of black smoke that was sucked into the felt of the table. The croupier scribe raked in the pile of glass coin wagers with a bone claw. They're not gambling for money, Naruto realized, a chill crawling down his spine. They're gambling for themselves. Welcome, welcome, a voice boomed, oily and reverberant. It came from the center of the room. A figure detached itself from behind a grand baccarat table. It was taller than the others, its silhouette shimmering with a dark rainbow sheen, like an oil slick. It wore a flowing, opulent robe that seemed woven from shadow and starlight. Where its face should be was a smooth, featureless mask of polished white ceramic, save for a single, blood-red symbol painted in the center, the kanji for debt. New players. Fresh capital. The house is always pleased to see new faces. Or, potentials for faces. The figure spread its void-like arms. The shadow patrons paused in their games, their blank heads turning toward the newcomers. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. "We don't want to play," Naruto said, stepping slightly in front of Tsunade. "Everyone plays," the figure, the casino master, intoned, its voice dropping to an intimate, threatening purr. "It is the first law of the gloom. All energy must circulate. All stories must be wagered. You have brought such vibrant stories with you. I can smell them. Loss, and debt." The mask seemed to tilt toward Tsunade. Tsunade straightened, pushing past Naruto. The pain was etched in every line of her body, but her chin was high, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You want a story? I've got 1,000,000 of them. And they all end the same way, the house loses." The casino master let out a sound that was like coins rattling in a hollow gourd. A laugh. "Bravo. Spirit. That is the best currency of all. Let us see if it spends." It gestured with a graceful, shadowy hand. The space between them and the master shimmered, and a familiar table materialized. A simple dice game, Chohan. 2 dice cups of polished black wood sat on the green felt. A classic. Simple. "A test of fortune," the master said. "Your stake, a memory. A potent one. The memory of your first great loss." Tsunade froze. Naruto felt a surge of protective anger. "No deal. We're not playing your sick game." "Then you forfeit," the master said lightly. "And the house claims its due from those who refuse to participate. We will take the motor function of your right arm. Permanently." It gestured toward Tsunade's corrupted shoulder. "You can't," Naruto began, but Tsunade's good hand clamped on his bicep, her grip like iron. "It's a predator, Naruto. It operates on rules. We have to play by them until we understand them." Her eyes were locked on the dice cups. The memory of her first great loss. Dan's smiling, blood-streaked face flashed behind her eyes. The weight of his body going limp in her arms. The scent of blood and battlefield mud. That memory was a cornerstone of her being, a scar around which her entire life had calcified. To lose it. "The stake is accepted," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Bachan, no. My game. My choice." She walked to the table, her movements stiff with pain and resolve. She picked up a cup with her left hand, her injured right arm hanging useless. She shook it with a practiced, violent snap of her wrist. The dice inside rattled. She slammed it down. "Even," she declared. The casino master's mask gave nothing away. It picked up the other cup, shook it with an unnerving, silent grace, and set it down. It lifted the cup. The dice showed a 3 and a 4. Odd. A soft, collective sigh came from the shadow patrons. Tsunade didn't flinch. But Naruto saw it, a momentary flicker in her eyes, a slight paling, as if a part of her had just been hollowed out. She hadn't just lost the memory, she'd felt it being taken. "A pity," the master said. "But the night is young. Double or nothing. Your stake, the memory of your hands remembering a healing technique. The mystical palm itself." Tsunade's breath hitched. That was her soul. Her art. Her grandfather's legacy. To forget the feel of chakra knitting flesh, the focus, the life-giving warmth, it would be to forget her core. "Don't." Naruto pleaded. "We can fight our way out." "Can we?" she asked, not looking at him. Her eyes were on the black veins spidering across her skin. On the impossible odds. The house always won. It was the one truth she'd built her life around. Her addiction wasn't to gambling, it was to the certainty of loss. This place was her psyche given form, and it knew her tells. She reached for the cup again. "I'll play." Naruto's shout echoed in the cavernous hall. He stepped to the table, shoulder to shoulder with Tsunade, his body vibrating with furious energy. The casino master's mask tilted. "The boy wishes to cover the lady's debt. How gallant. And what do you have to wager? Your memories are so loud. So bright. You want a story? Naruto snarled. I've got one. The memory of the day I was named the biggest failure in the academy. The day everyone looked at me like I was garbage. It was a sharp, old pain, a childhood splinter. Naruto, you don't have to, Tsunade started. It's my turn, he said, cutting her off. He grabbed the cup. He didn't shake it with Tsunade's grim precision. He shook it with all the chaotic, hopeful fury that defined him. He slammed it down. Even. The master mirrored the action. The cup lifted. 2-5 stared up at them. Even. A ripple went through the shadow patrons. The master was silent for a beat. A win. The debt is cleared. And you keep your poignant little memory. It sounded almost disappointed. But the table is open. Will you press your luck? Naruto's heart hammered. He'd won. He'd beaten the house. A wild, reckless grin started to form on his face. This thing wasn't invincible. Naruto, stop, Tsunade said, her voice low and urgent. It's letting you win. It's hooking you. But the rush was already there. The same rush Tsunade chased. The belief that this time would be different. My stake, Naruto said, ignoring her. The memory of my first kiss. It was a silly, awkward, wonderful memory with Hinata. He'd die before he lost it. But he felt lucky. The dice were with him. Naruto. Tsunade's voice was a lash. He shook, slammed, called, odd. The master lifted its cup. A 1 and a 2. Odd. He'd won again. The memory remained, now tinged with the giddy thrill of risk. See? Naruto said, turning to Tsunade, his eyes bright. We can beat it. Tsunade saw the look in his eyes. It was her own reflection from 1,000 sake house mirrors. The hungry, desperate glint. The gambler's fallacy, given flesh and chakra. This world wasn't just attacking their bodies, it was weaponizing their deepest flaws. The boy has fire, the master chuckled. A true player is born. What next? What core memory will you risk? The moment you first formed a Rasengan? The first time you felt the Ninetales' power? The day you brought Sasuke Uchiha home? Each name was a hook in Naruto's soul. The stakes escalated with every suggestion, pulling at his identity. The shadow patrons were gathering closer, their static murmur rising in pitch, feeding on the psychic drama. Don't listen to it. Tsunade grabbed his arm with her good hand. It's reading you. It knows what you value most. But Naruto was in the grip of it now. The chance to win big. To not just recover Tsunade's loss, but to win something for her. To fix this with a lucky roll. My stake, he said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. The memory of Irika-sensei giving me his forehead protector. The master's mask seemed to gleam. A powerful token. Accepted. Naruto, I order you to stop. Tsunade's voice was the voice of the Hokage, a command that had halted armies. It barely registered. He shook the cup, a manic energy in his movements. Odd. The master lifted its cup. 2 6s. Even. The loss wasn't a gentle forgetting. It was a rip. Naruto gasped, staggering back as if physically struck. A foundational pillar of his sense of belonging, the weight of that forehead protector, Irika's tearful, proud smile, was violently extracted. A cold, blank spot remained in his mental landscape. He remembered the event factually, but the emotion, the warmth, the transformative love was gone. It was a memory now in black and white, silent and flat. No, he whispered, touching his forehead where the protector sat. It felt like a stranger's item. The house always balances the books, the master said smoothly. But you may win it back. Your stake, the memory of meeting Jiraiya of the Sannin. No. Tsunade roared, her own loss forgotten in the face of this greater theft. She stepped between Naruto and the table. The game is over. The game ends when the house says it ends, the master replied, its voice turning cold, the oily charm evaporating. The shadow patrons pressed in, their forms losing their gambler's affectations, becoming jagged, predatory. The croupier scribes raised their bone styluses, points aimed. Naruto was shaking, reeling from the hollow ache where a cherished memory had been. He looked at Tsunade, her back to him, shielding him despite her crippling injury. He saw her trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of standing, from the corruption, from the same addictive pull she was fighting for his sake. He had been an idiot. He'd played right into this world's hands. Literally. He'd lost a piece of himself. He couldn't let her lose any more. And he couldn't let this place win. A new kind of determination, cold and clear, cut through the addictive fog of the gamble. It wasn't about winning a game with fixed rules. It was about smashing the table. He placed a hand on Tsunade's good shoulder. "We're leaving. The debt is unsettled," the master hissed. "We're paying a different way," Naruto said. He looked past the master, past the shadow patrons, to the ornate, bone chandelier above the central table. He formed a single-hand seal. Shadow clone jutsu. Not a dozen. Not 100. 5 clones popped into existence in the crowded space, causing the shadows to recoil momentarily. Rasengan, he and the clones yelled in unison. But they weren't aiming at the master or the patrons. All 6 Rasengans, 5 blue, 1 swirling with faint gold, shot upward, arcing through the cavernous space toward the chandelier's central support chain. "You fool! You'll bring the roof down," the master shrieked, its ceramic mass cracking with a sound like ice breaking. The Rasengan struck true. The chain, old and corroded, shattered. The massive bone chandelier plummeted. Tsunade was already moving, yanking Naruto back toward the door with surprising strength. "Doton, Dorihiki," she gasped, slamming her one good hand to the floor. A thick, though hastily formed, earth wall erupted from the stones behind them, sealing the doorway just as the chandelier hit the floor with a cataclysmic boom. The sound was followed by a symphony of shattering bone, splintering wood, and the panicked, vacuum-like shrieks of dissolving shadow patrons. The garish lights flickered and died, plunging the hall behind their wall into darkness and chaotic noise. Naruto and Tsunade didn't wait. They ran back down the brick tunnel, away from the fading cacophony of the collapsed casino, the ghost of lost memories and a broken addiction chasing them only in their minds. When they finally collapsed, gasping, back in a side tunnel, the distant bell was chiming again, slower now. Naruto looked at Tsunade, his eyes wide with the horror of what he'd lost, and the shame of what he'd almost become. "I'm sorry," he rasped. I lost Irika-sensei." Tsunade, leaning against the wall, her face beaded with sweat from the effort of the earth wall, looked at him. Not with pity, but with a grim, shared understanding. "I know," she said simply. "This place, it doesn't fight fair. It fights dirty. It fights us." She looked down at her corrupted arm. "We can't play its games, Naruto. We have to break them." He nodded, the lesson carved into him now not by a teacher's kindness, but by a predator's theft. He had one less memory, but he'd gained a crucial piece of intelligence. In the gloom, the most dangerous enemy was the reflection of your own weakness staring back at you from the darkness. Chapter 4, The 100-Headed Jizo. The silence after the casino's collapse was heavier than before, freighted with what they'd lost. Naruto's head felt like a library with a crucial scroll burned out, leaving only cold ashes and the ghost of warmth where a cherished story used to be. He kept touching his forehead protector, the leather and metal familiar under his fingers, but the emotional resonance, the why it was so precious, was a hollow echo. Tsunade's pain was a more present, physical agony. The black corruption had advanced past her collarbone, tendrils now fingering their way toward her sternum. Each heartbeat sent a fresh wave of sickly gray through the visible veins in her neck. Her right hand was completely numb, the fingers curled like a dead spider. She moved with a stiff, lurching gait, her breathing a controlled, rhythmic exercise to master the shudders that wanted to rack her frame. They followed the sound of the bell. It was no longer a curiosity, but the only thread in a labyrinth that seemed designed to reflect their inner decay. The brick tunnel gave way to a rough-hewn stone passage that sloped upwards, the air growing marginally drier, the cloying sense of decay and ozone fading slightly. The ever-present hum of the gloom was quieter here, less a pressure and more a distant, nagging buzz at the edge of perception. "The bell, it feels different," Naruto said, his voice hoarse. "Less like a lure, more like a marker." Tsunade grunted in agreement, saving her breath for walking. A beacon. But for what? Safety or a bigger trap? They rounded a corner, and the passage opened into a small, circular chamber. And there, in the center, was the source of the chime. It was a statue. A Jizo statue, the kind found along roadsides in the Fire Country, meant to protect travelers and comfort lost souls. But this one was monumental, rising 15 feet to the low, domed ceiling. It was carved from a stone that seemed to be neither gray nor brown, but a soft, weathered beige that held a faint inner warmth. And it had not one head, but 100. Each head was slightly different, some serene, some sorrowful, some smiling gently, some in deep contemplation, arranged in rows around the central body like the petals of a stone flower. In its multiple hands, it held not the usual staff and jewel, but an assortment of carved objects, a tiny shield, a scroll, a medicine bowl, a sheathed sword, a child's toy. Moss, not the phosphorescent blue of the outside, but a healthy, velvety green, grew in the seams between the heads. The air here was clean. It smelled of dry stone, old incense, and something incredibly rare in this world, peace. A small, brass bell hung from the ceiling by a frayed red cord, swinging gently in a draft they couldn't feel, letting out its soft, periodic chime. But what arrested them was the light. A soft, golden-white glow emanated from the statue, not from a single point, but from the entire surface, pulsing gently like a slow, steady heartbeat. As Naruto watched, he felt the deadened, blistered skin on his hands tingle. Not with pain, but with a faint, soothing warmth. Chakra, he breathed. Real chakra. It wasn't just chakra. It was familiar. It had the deep, earthy resilience of Hashirama Senju's power, the sharp, precise clarity of a master medic, and woven through it, a stubborn, unbreakable will that reminded him of his own. Tsunade stumbled forward, drawn like a plant to sunlight. She stopped a few feet from the statue's base, her good hand outstretched. As her fingertips entered the circle of light, the black veins crawling up her arm recoiled. Not much, just a subtle darkening retreat, like ink withdrawing from heat. A soft, shuddering sigh escaped her lips, the first sound of relief she'd made since the needle struck. It's a sanctuary, she whispered, awe cutting through her pain. A pocket of our world's energy. Or, a memory of it, given form. Naruto joined her, the light washing over him. The hollow ache in his mind didn't fill, but it stopped throbbing. The constant, low-grade fear that had been his companion since arrival eased its grip. He saw that offerings had been left at the statue's base, not glass coins or tarry substances, but simple things. A smooth river stone. A carefully folded leaf that hadn't crumbled to dust. A tiny, perfectly carved wooden fox figurine, worn with age. People have been here, Naruto said, crouching to examine the fox. It was crude but charming. Or, things that remembered being people. Tsunade was already in medic mode, her analytical mind overriding her relief. She scanned the statue, the chamber. The chakra is ancient. Layered. It's a construct, a self-sustaining seal of immense complexity. It's not just repelling the gloom, it's actively converting it, at a micro-level, into this benign energy. Her eyes, bloodshot and pained, widened. This is a work of my grandfather's scale. But blended with something else. Uzumaki sealing arts. Naruto perked up. Uzumaki? Before Tsunade could answer, a section of the wall behind the Jizo shimmered. Not like the casino's illusions, but like a heat haze resolving. A figure stepped through. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. Its body was composed of interlocking segments of smooth, pale wood and woven, living vines. Moss and small, white flowers grew in the joints. Its face was a smooth, featureless oval of polished amber, within which a soft, green light pulsed in time with the statue's glow. It moved with a silent, graceful rustle, like leaves in a gentle breeze. In its wooden hands, it carried a simple clay bowl filled with clear water that reflected the golden light. The creature stopped, its amber face regarding them. It made no hostile move. A guardian? Naruto muttered, falling into a loose defensive stance. The creature tilted its head. A sound emanated from it, not from a mouth, but from the rustling of its vines and the gentle creak of its wood. It was a language, but not of words. Naruto felt a meaning impress itself directly into his mind, wounded. Lost. Children of the leaf and the spiral. Tsunade, her senses attuned to life energy, felt the creature's intent more clearly. It held no malice. Only a deep, weary kindness, like an old gardener tending a plot in a long-forgotten war. She lowered her guard, slowly, and gave a slight, respectful bow from the neck. We seek sanctuary. And knowledge. The creature, the warden, approached. It offered the clay bowl to Tsunade first. She hesitated for only a second before accepting it with her left hand. The water was cool and utterly pure. She drank. It was the first thing that hadn't tasted of dust or decay. A simple, profound relief washed through her, momentarily cutting through the fatigue and pain. She passed the bowl to Naruto. He drank greedily. The water was like life itself. He could feel it spreading through him, not just hydrating, but gently scrubbing away the residual grime of the gloom from his spirit. The blisters on his hands itched with healthy regeneration. Come, the warden's rustling voice spoke in their minds. It turned and walked back toward the shimmering wall. Exchanging a look, they followed. The wall parted for them like a curtain of light, and they entered a small, hidden annex behind the statue. The room was a workshop, or a study. Shelves carved directly into the stone held scrolls, real parchment scrolls, brittle with age but intact. A stone desk held writing implements. And on a small dais at the back, illuminated by a single, floating orb of the same golden chakra, lay one scroll, larger than the others, sealed with a wax emblem that made both of them catch their breath. The emblem was a composite, the Senju clan symbol, interlocked with the Uzumaki spiral. A joint artifact, Tsunade breathed, her pain forgotten in scholarly fascination. She moved to the dais, her injured arm held tight to her body. With reverent care, she used her left hand to break the wax seal, which crumbled to dust at her touch, and unrolled the first section of the scroll. Naruto peered over her shoulder. The script was ancient, but readable. It was a journal of sorts, written in a strong, decisive hand. Entry 47, The Gloom Advances. It is not an invasion, but a consumption. A forgetting. It unpicks the seams of reality where memory and emotion run thin. Our world grows quieter by the day. Entry 89, with Mito, we have theorized a defense. Not a wall, for walls can be worn down. A seed. A self-sustaining idea given chakra form. The concept of sanctuary. Of protection for the lost. We shall imbue it with our combined wills, my life force, her sealing mastery, and the unwavering spirit of her young nephew, who insists on adding hope to the matrix. The child has a point. Tsunade's finger traced the writing. Mito Uzumaki. My grandmother. And Hashirama. And the young nephew, she looked at Naruto. That would have been an Uzumaki ancestor of yours. They built this place. Together. Naruto felt a weird surge of pride. His crazy, stubborn clan had a hand in this. Tsunade continued unrolling. The entries described the creation of the 100-headed Jizo, the warden, a nature spirit bound to the sanctuary, and then. Entry 120, The Gloom Adapts. It creates reflections of our inner worlds to trap us. It feeds on narrative, on obsession. We cannot fight it with force alone. Force is a story it understands too well. We must change the story. Entry 121, Mito has conceived of a new art. Not a jutsu for one, but a symphony for two. A forced synergy is useless. It must be a willing resonance. A bridging of disparate chakra natures to create something the gloom cannot parse, not a weapon, but a concept made manifest. She calls it the symbiotic art, the Uzumaki contract. It is not about control. It is about completion. The scroll detailed the theoretical underpinnings, chakra harmony, wavelength alignment, emotional congruence. It was incredibly dense, half philosophy, half high-level sealing math. The Uzumaki contract, Naruto read the title aloud. What does it do? Tsunade's eyes were scanning the diagrams, her medic's mind coming alive despite her condition. It's a framework. For two shinobi to combine their powers not in a simple additive way, but in a multiplicative, transformative way. Look. She pointed a trembling finger at a diagram showing two spirals, one green, one gold, weaving around each other to form a double helix of light. It's based on the principle that two conflicting forces, when perfectly aligned, don't cancel each other out. They create a stable, third state that is greater than the sum. Like the opposing forces that hold an atom together. So, a fusion jutsu? Naruto asked, thinking of the way he'd combined chakra with others. No, Tsunade said, her voice gaining strength with her fascination. Fusions are temporary, crude mergings. This is about sustained, resonant partnership. It would allow for shared senses, pooled chakra regeneration, coordinated techniques on an instinctive level, and potentially, the ability to generate a chakra signature so harmonically dense it could repel the gloom by its very existence. Her eyes flicked to her corrupted arm. Or heal corruption that rejects singular chakra natures. Hope, fierce and desperate, ignited in Naruto's chest. Can we learn it? Now? Tsunade gave a short, pained laugh. This is doctoral-level chakra theory combined with profound spiritual practice. It requires absolute trust, deep understanding of one's own chakra and your partner's, and emotional synchronization. It's the work of a lifetime for a dedicated pair. She looked at him, her gaze frank. We are a traumatized, pain-addled medic and you. Hey. Who has just had a core memory stolen and is running on panic and stubbornness, she finished, not unkindly. We are possibly the worst candidates in any world to attempt this. Naruto's shoulders slumped. The golden light of the sanctuary suddenly felt like it was highlighting their inadequacy. The warden, who had been standing silently by the entrance, rustled. It approached the dais and placed a wooden hand on the scroll, over a final passage they hadn't read yet. Tsunade unrolled it further. Final entry, the sanctuary is complete. The warden will tend it. The contract is written, not for us, but for those who come after. For the children who will be born into a darker world. Do not seek to master the contract through study alone. It is learned in the doing. In the sharing of burden. In the moment when you and I become weak not out of choice, but out of necessity. The first step is not alignment. It is vulnerability. Show your wound to your partner, and let them show you theirs. Only from that honesty can resonance begin. We go now to face the heart of the gloom. We do not expect to return. But if you read this, children of our legacy, know this, the light is not gone. It is waiting to be rekindled. Together. Hashirama Senju and Mito Uzumaki. Silence filled the little room, thick with the weight of the past and the daunting challenge of the present. Naruto looked from the scroll to Tsunade's corrupted arm, then to his own hands, which had tried and failed to heal her. He thought of the hollow space where Irika's pride used to live. He thought of her lost memory of Dan, and the terrifying grip of her addiction in the casino. Vulnerability. Sharing wounds. He took a deep breath. My wound, he said, his voice unusually quiet. It's not just the memory. It's the fear. That I'm not enough. That I'll fail to protect everyone I care about. I failed to bring Sasuke back for years. I failed to stop pain before he destroyed the village. And now. I've failed you. I got you pulled into this, and I can't fix it. He couldn't meet her eyes, staring at the stone floor instead. Tsunade was silent for a long moment. She looked at the stubborn, spiky-haired boy who had once been a loudmouth nuisance, who had grown into the savior of the village, and who now sat slumped with a guilt he didn't deserve. She saw the shadow of the orphan in him, the one that mirrored her own decades of running from loss. She let out a long, slow breath, the medicinal control slipping to reveal raw, unfiltered exhaustion and fear. My wound, she said, her voice rough. It's not the corruption. It's the belief that I am, ultimately, a curse. That everyone I love dies. Dan. Nawaki. Jiraiya. I distance myself. I gamble. I drink. Because connection is a prelude to loss. And this, she gestured weakly with her dead arm, this is just the universe making the metaphor literal. I am being consumed by the absence I've always carried. The admission hung in the chakra-lit air. It was the most honest they had ever been with each other, stripped of titles, of bravado, of the roles of Hokage and successor. The warden rustled approvingly. The golden light from the Jizo seemed to pulse a little brighter, washing over them. On the scroll, the diagram of the two spirals began to glow faintly. Nothing dramatic happened. No surge of power, no instant mastery. But something shifted. The oppressive weight of the gloom outside the sanctuary felt more distinct, a clear enemy rather than a suffocating blanket. And the space between them felt different. The air didn't crackle with unspoken tension, but held a new, fragile understanding. The first step, Tsunade murmured, looking at the glowing diagram. Naruto finally looked up, meeting her gaze. There was no pity there. No judgment. Just a shared, grim acknowledgement of their broken pieces. We're a mess, he said, a ghost of his old grin trying to surface. A catastrophic mess, Tsunade agreed, a corner of her mouth twitching. But we're our catastrophic mess. She looked back at the scroll, at the complex seals and theories. Learning this, it won't be training. It will be triage. Surgery on our own fighting styles. On how we think. Naruto stood up, his determination refueled, now focused and clear, not reckless. Then we start now. You tell me what to do. With the chakra, with the resonant stuff. He offered her his hand, not to pull her up, but in pact. Tsunade looked at his hand, then at her own corrupted one. She didn't take it. Instead, she nodded toward the main chamber. First, we rest. In the light. We let the Jizo's energy slow the corruption. We drink more water. We sleep in shifts. Then, she looked at the scroll, then back at him, the Hokage's resolve solidifying in her eyes. Then we attempt chapter 1 of the Uzumaki contract, awareness of the other's pulse. We have a long, impossible road ahead. But for the first time, we have a map. They moved back into the gentle glow of the 100-headed Jizo. The warden brought them more water and a paste made from the moss that tasted of herbs and strength. They sat with their backs against the warm stone of the statue's base, the bell chiming softly above them, a metronome for their first fragile moment of peace. Sanctuary had been found. Not just a place, but a purpose. The fight was far from over, but they were no longer just fleeing. They were preparing to answer, with a unified voice, the silent scream of the gloom. Chapter 5, Chakra as a Beacon. Sleep, in the gloom, was not an escape. It was a descent into a more intimate battlefield. Naruto dreamed first. Not of the casino or the scribes, but of Konoha, but a Konoha under the Jizo's sickly green sky. The streets were empty, the buildings pristine yet lifeless. He ran, calling for Irika, for Kakashi, for Hinata. His voice made no sound. From the Hokage monument, smooth, blank faces like the scribes stared down, dripping silver tears that pooled in the streets, rising to his ankles, then his knees. He tried to form a Rasengan, but his chakra sputtered and died, absorbed by the liquid silence. The tears reached his neck, cold and thick as oil, and he woke with a gasp that echoed in the sanctum stillness. Tsunade's sleep was a medical scan of her own decay. She dreamed in the sterile, white light of an operating theater. She stood over her own body on the table, her right arm a mass of black, throbbing filaments. With her left hand, she wielded a chakra scalpel, trying to excise the corruption. But every cut bled more darkness, and the filaments would regrow, whispering in a chorus of familiar voices, Dan's last sigh, Nawaki's cheerful boast cut short, Jiraiya's final, bloody chuckle. You can't heal this, the voices hissed. You are the infection. She jerked awake, her good hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a cry, the phantom scent of antiseptic and blood in her nostrils. They didn't speak of their dreams. The shared silence in the golden glow was acknowledgement enough. The warden provided a simple, pasty sustenance made from pulverized moss and a tuber that grew in hidden cracks, tasting of bland earth and faint minerals. It was fuel, not food. Tsunade ate methodically, analyzing its effect on her chakra. Minimal life signature, but clean. No gloom contamination. It will maintain our base metabolism, but not replenish chakra reserves. That, we must do ourselves, and carefully. Which led to their first, critical lesson, meditation. Naruto's relationship with meditation was, at best, adversarial. Sitting still felt like a betrayal of his every instinct. But this wasn't the Toad Sage's stillness in motion. This was the first exercise in the Uzumaki contract, awareness of the other's pulse. They sat facing each other, knees almost touching, in the heart of the Jizo's light. Tsunade, pale but focused, her corrupted arm resting in her lap. Naruto, fidgeting, the stone floor cold against his legs. Close your eyes, Tsunade instructed, her voice assuming the calm, measured tone of a teacher. Don't try to sense my chakra. That's too crude. First, listen to the room. The drip of moisture somewhere distant. The sigh of your own breath. The beat of your heart. Naruto tried. He heard his heartbeat, a frantic rabbit thump in his chest. He heard Tsunade's breathing, a slow, controlled rasp with a faint, wet click on the inhale, the sound of the corruption in her lungs' periphery. He heard the eternal, soft chime of the bell. Plink. Thump thump. Rasp. Chime. Now, Tsunade murmured, her voice dropping, becoming part of the soundscape. Feel the chakra in the air. Not as power, but as temperature. Texture. The Jizo's energy is warm, granular, like sunlight on sand. Your own chakra is a heat in your belly, buzzing, eager. The gloom, she paused, and Naruto felt her shudder slightly, the gloom is an absence of both. A cold, smooth steel. Naruto strained. He felt the warmth of the sanctuary, a blanket over his skin. He felt the familiar, restless boiler of Kurama's and his own chakra mingled in his core. And then, at the very edge of his perception, like a draft under a door, he felt it, a subtle leaching of warmth, a silent siphon. It was coming from the archway leading out. The gloom, patiently waiting. Good, Tsunade said, as if she'd felt his realization. Now. Don't reach for me. Just, let your awareness relax. Like you're unfocusing your eyes. And tell me what you sense, not from the room, but from the space between us. Naruto let out a long, slow breath, trying to let the frantic energy settle. He stopped trying to sense and just, existed. At first, there was nothing. Then, a faint impression began to form. Not a color or a sound, but a quality. A dense, green-gold resilience, like an ancient tree that had weathered 1,000 storms, but with a deep, aching fracture running through its heartwood. The fracture pulsed with a cold, black ache. You feel strong, Naruto whispered, eyes still closed. But hurt. A really deep hurt. And, sad. A quiet sad. Tsunade was silent for a moment. Accurate, she finally said, her voice unreadable. Now, me. I sense, a star. A young, furious sun. All that heat and light, desperately trying to push back an ocean of cold space. And a blank spot. A shadow on the sun's surface. Where something precious was taken. Naruto's throat tightened. He hadn't described his missing memory, but she'd felt its shape in his energy field. This is the foundation, Tsunade said, opening her eyes. Her gaze was weary but sharp. Before we can resonate, we must be able to perceive each other's chakra state as clearly as our own. Not the amount, but the health. The emotion. The wound. In a fight here, visual cues are lies. The gloom feeds on panic and miscommunication. Your sense of my fracture will tell you when I am nearing my limit, before I collapse. My sense of your blank spot might warn me if you're being psychologically targeted again. It made a terrible, logical sense. This wasn't about power, it was about survival intimacy. They practiced for hours, the bell marking the passage of a time that had no meaning. They moved from simple awareness to guided exercises. Tsunade would flare her chakra subtly, a quick pulse of medical energy in her left hand. Naruto had to point to where he felt it on her body without looking. He failed more than he succeeded, mistaking the pulse for the general ache of her corruption. Then they switched. Naruto tried to replicate the Nine-Tails chakra in a single fingertip, a nearly impossible task of control for him. The result was a wild, sparking flare that made the Jizo's light flicker. Tsunade didn't flinch. Left index finger, she said calmly. Sloppy. Leaking like a sieve. You're broadcasting our position to anything with a chakra sense for a mile. Well, sorry for not being a chakra control freak. Naruto shot back, frustration boiling over. Your lack of control will get us killed, she stated flatly. Not eventually. Soon. The gloom is drawn to chaotic energy like a scavenger to a dying animal. Your raw power is a bonfire. I need you to learn how to be a focused laser. The truth of it stung. He'd always relied on overwhelming force. Here, force was a dinner bell. The warden observed their training, a silent, plant-like sentinel. As Naruto's frustration peaked, the creature rustled forward. It placed a wooden hand on Naruto's chest, over his heart, and another on Tsunade's forehead seal. A wave of pure, calm, vegetative consciousness flowed through them, not words, but an understanding. It showed them an image, a great forest. A wildfire, Naruto, raged through it, destructive, consuming. A gentle, persistent rain, Tsunade, fell, trying to douse it, only creating steam and chaos. Then, the image changed. The fire banked, becoming a network of warm, glowing roots underground. The rain seeped down, not to fight the fire, but to nourish the roots. Together, they made the forest not just survive, but thrive. Symbiosis. Not dominance. Not submission. Partnership. The lesson was profound. Naruto's next attempt at control wasn't about stifling his energy, but about imagining it as a root system, spreading with intent, not explosion. Tsunade's guidance became less about criticism and more about providing the water, the precise, corrective adjustments to his wavelength. By what felt like the end of the day, Naruto could, with intense concentration, light a single chakra flame on his thumb that burned steady and blue for a full minute without a spark. Tsunade could project a localized healing field the size of a coin that made the moss at her feet glow brighter. They were exhausted, mentally frayed. But a new, fragile thread connected them, a shared chakra awareness. It was then that the sanctuary was tested. A low groan echoed through the stone, not from the tunnels, but from the world itself. The Jizo's golden light dimmed for a heart-stopping second. The black veins on Tsunade's arm throbbed, reaching another inch toward her heart. She gasped, bending double. What was that? Naruto was on his feet, clones already forming instinctively. The warden rustled urgently, pointing to the archway they had entered from. Its meaning was clear, the gloom has sensed the concentration of life energy. It is testing the wards. From the dark tunnel, a new sound emerged. Not scratching, not fluttering. A slow, wet, dragging sound. Like something heavy and soft being pulled across the stone. And a smell wafted in, cutting through the incense and moss, the pungent, overpowering reek of gangrene and spoiled milk. Tsunade forced herself upright, her face a mask of pain and determination. It's drawn to our active chakra use. To my corruption. It's a beacon. She looked at Naruto, the Hokage's command in her eyes. We have to reinforce the sanctuary. The contract, Chapter 2, Shared Chakra Reinforcement. It's a basic ward, but it requires dual casting. We have to do it. Now. Naruto didn't hesitate. Tell me. They moved to the archway. The dragging sound was closer. They could hear a liquid dripping now, syncopated with the drag. Hands on the arch stone, Tsunade ordered, placing her good left hand on the cold stone to the left of the opening. Channel your chakra into it, but don't push. Imagine you're threading a needle. I'll do the same on the right. Our energies have to meet in the center of the arch and bind. Naruto placed his right hand on the right side stone. He closed his eyes, reaching for the calm, root-like chakra he'd just practiced. He pushed a thin, steady stream of gold into the stone. He could feel Tsunade's charma, a sharp, green thread, entering from the other side. The problem was immediate. Their chakras didn't want to merge. His was too wild, eager to surge, hers was too precise, repelling the chaos. In the space between, their energies sparked and crackled, a discordant fizzle. The dragging was at the tunnel's mouth now. They could see a shape in the darkness beyond the archway, a slumped, bulbous mass, pale and glistening under a coating of slime. Multiple limp, boneless arms trailed behind it. It's not working. Naruto hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. Remember the forest. Tsunade snapped, her own composure cracking. Don't push against me. Flow with me. Match my frequency. Match her frequency. It was like trying to sing a harmony to a song he'd never heard. He let go of his desire to control the output and instead focused on the awareness exercise. He felt her chakra's precise, rhythmic pulse. He stopped forcing his own and instead let his energy vibrate, adjusting, searching. There. A moment of dissonance, then a sudden, shocking click. His gold and her green didn't mix. They began to spiral around each other in the heart of the arch stone, a double helix of light. Where they intertwined, the stone itself began to glow with a soft, pearlescent sheen. A faint, humming barrier of light shimmered into existence across the archway. The dragging stopped. The glistening mass in the darkness pressed against the new barrier. Where it touched, the pearlescent light sizzled, and the creature recoiled with a wet, bubbling shriek. It retreated a few feet, pulsating angrily, but it could not cross. Naruto and Tsunade held the channel, their breath coming in synced gasps. Maintaining the dual ward was a constant, delicate balancing act. Naruto's instinct was to pour more power into it, but he felt Tsunade's signal, a slight strain in her green thread, and knew that would break their harmony. He held steady, matching her output ounce for ounce. Minutes stretched. The creature outside let out a final, frustrated gurgle and began to drag itself away, the sound fading. Only then did they let go, breaking the connection. The pearlescent barrier faded, but a residual glow remained in the arch stone. They slumped against the wall on either side of the arch, utterly spent. But they had done it. They had created something together the gloom could not pass. In the soft afterglow of the Jizo's light, Tsunade looked across at Naruto. There was no praise. Just a slow, acknowledging nod. Your frequency control is still terrible. Naruto, too tired for anger, managed a weak grin. But we did it. We did, she conceded. And for the first time, the word we didn't feel like a burden, but like the only solid ground in a shifting world. They had turned their chakra from a beacon that attracted predators into a shield that could, however briefly, keep them out. It was a small, hard-won victory. The first of many they would need to survive. Chapter 6, The Price of a Pulse. The creature's departure left a lingering miasma of decay that even the Jizo's light couldn't fully cleanse. The sanctuary felt less like a fortress and more like a lifeboat in a sea of rot. Tsunade's condition was the ticking clock in the center of it all. The shared ward effort had strained her, and the black corruption now cradled the lower curve of her jawline, a dark mandible against her pale skin. The fingers of her right hand were black and shriveled, utterly lifeless. They had water, moss paste, and a theory. The Uzumaki contract scroll spoke of harmonic resonance as a potential purifying force. But theory was a frail shield against the visceral reality of her decay. It was the warden who presented the next, terrible step. As they shared a silent meal, the wooden creature rustled over to a corner of the sanctum where the Jizo's light was weakest, near the floor. There, nestled in a crack where the green moss grew thin, was a small, trembling creature. It looked like a hare, but wrong. Its fur was patchy, revealing gray, leathery skin beneath. One eye was a milky, blind orb, the other glowed with a faint, sickly yellow gleam, a captured spark of gloom energy. It breathed in ragged, whistling gasps, its sides heaving. Around its hind leg, a ring of black, crystalline growths had formed, identical in texture to the corruption on Tsunade's arm, but external, like a fungal infection. A gloom beast, Naruto murmured, his appetite vanishing. The warden placed a gentle wooden hand near the creature, not touching it. Its rustling voice filled their minds with sorrowful images, the creature, once a normal animal of this world, or a memory of one, grazing on benign moss. It had ventured too far, brushed against a patch of raw gloom seep, and been infected. It had stumbled back to the sanctuary, drawn by the fading memory of life the Jizo represented, but it was too late. The sanctuary's energy slowed the corruption but could not reverse it. The creature was in agony, its life force being slowly replaced by static, crystalline anti-chakra. Tsunade stared at it, her medic's brain engaging despite her revulsion. It's a localized infection. More advanced than mine, but similar in nature. Externalized. The warden's meaning became clear. It was a test subject. An opportunity. You want me to heal it? Tsunade asked, her voice hollow. The warden nodded its amber head. A cascade of images followed, Tsunade's precise, green chakra. The double helix pattern from the ward. The concept of using not just her own energy, but a resonant energy, one that could match and dismantle the gloom's frequency. It's too dangerous, Naruto said immediately. Your chakra attracts that stuff. Trying to heal it is like poking a nest of wasps. It's dying, Tsunade said, not looking away from the twitching hair. And its corruption is a purer sample. If I can understand how to break it down there. She glanced at her own arm, I might find a way to slow it here. It's triage, Naruto. You gather data where you can. This isn't a battlefield hospital. That thing is made of the stuff that's killing you. All the more reason to study it, she fired back, a flash of her old temper cutting through her pain. I am not going to sit here and slowly turn to stone while we theorize about harmony. Medicine is practiced on the sick, not the well. She knelt beside the creature, her movements stiff. The hair's good eye rolled toward her, filled with a dumb, animal terror. The smell this close was nauseating, sweet putrescence and ozone. Naruto, she said, her tone shifting to one of command. I need you to do the awareness exercise. Monitor my chakra pulse. The second you feel the corruption reacting aggressively, or my rhythm faltering, you break the connection. Physically if you have to. He wanted to argue. To grab her and pull her back. But he saw the look in her eye, the same look she had when facing down Pain, or Madara. The Hokage's resolve, tempered by the healer's desperate compassion. He couldn't deny it. Fine, he gritted out, settling across from her, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. But if it goes wrong, I'm blowing it to bits with a Rasengan. Noted, she said dryly. She closed her eyes, taking several deep, centering breaths. Her left hand began to glow with the soft, green light of the mystical palm technique. The moment her chakra touched the air near the infected leg, the black crystals reacted. They didn't just sit there. They shivered, and tiny, hair-like filaments of darkness extended from them, reaching for the green light like roots seeking water. Tsunade didn't flinch. She moved her hand slowly, not touching the crystals, but passing over the healthy gray skin just above the infection. Her chakra sank into the tissue. Naruto, with his newly honed awareness, could feel it, a delicate probe, mapping the boundaries where life met anti-life. It's converting, she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. At the cellular level. It's not destroying the tissue, it's rewriting its energy signature. Turning living chakra into structured nothingness. She increased the output slightly, trying to push a wave of pure healing energy into the corrupted zone to overwhelm it. It was a mistake. The black crystals flared. The hair-like filaments lashed out, not at her chakra, but at her physical hand, moving with shocking speed. One fine thread of darkness pierced the skin of her left index finger. Tsunade hissed, a sharp intake of breath. Naruto felt it through their bond, a jolt of invasive, soul-deep cold, followed by a spike of panic she immediately suppressed. On her finger, a tiny black dot appeared, and a single gray vein began to crawl up toward her knuckle. Pull back. Naruto urged. Not yet, she ground out. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her upper lip. She didn't retreat. Instead, she did something reckless, brilliant, and utterly Tsunade. She fed the corruption. She focused her chakra not on fighting the black thread, but on amplifying the life energy in the cells it was invading. She made them brighter, more vibrant, more alive. It was like pouring oil on a fire to drown it. The black thread, accustomed to consuming feeble, dying energy, recoiled from the sudden intensity. It writhed, confused. For a split second, the conversion process at the infection's edge stuttered. In that moment, Tsunade struck. Not with brute force, but with a surgeon's precision. A filament of her chakra, sharpened to a monomolecular edge, sliced through the invading thread at the point of entry and instantly cauterized the wound on her finger with a pulse of pure heat. The detached thread dissolved into smoke. She withdrew her hand, cradling it against her chest. The black dot remained on her fingertip, but it was isolated, contained. A tiny trophy of a horrifying skirmish. The hair, however, was not so lucky. The flare of corruption had been a death knell. The black crystals pulsed once, violently, and then spread inward like cracking ice. The creature gave one final, shuddering breath and went still. Its body didn't decay, it crystallized, turning into a fragile, black statuette that crumbled into glittering dust a second later. Silence, save for Tsunade's ragged breathing. Naruto stared at the pile of dark dust. Did you learn anything? Tsunade was examining her black-specked finger, her expression unreadable. I learned it's aggressive. Territorial. It defends its host because the host is its food source. I learned it can be startled, momentarily, by an overwhelming surge of positive chakra. But I also learned. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, Naruto saw a flicker of something that wasn't pain or determination. It was horror. I learned what it feels like. From the inside. That cold. It's not just emptiness. It's loneliness. A loneliness so profound it wants everything else to be lonely too. She shuddered, a full-body convulsion that had nothing to do with physical pain. The gray vein on her finger twitched. Your arm, Naruto said, pointing. The corruption on her shoulder had reacted to her experiment. The black veins had spidered out another half-inch while she was focused, digging deeper. The numbness was creeping past her elbow now. I accelerated it, she stated flatly. By using my chakra aggressively. The two corruptions are networked. They communicate. She let out a bitter, exhausted laugh. So the healer's touch is now a death sentence. Perfect. Naruto felt a surge of helpless anger. So what do we do? Just sit here until it reaches your heart? No, she said, her voice regaining its steel. We use the second thing I learned. It can be startled. Confused. She looked at him, her gaze sharpening. Your chakra. It's not like mine. Mine is precise, surgical, life-giving. Yours is volcanic. Primal. It's not just life. It's will. It's defiance. The fox's chakra especially is pure, raging identity. The opposite of the gloom's annihilating loneliness. A plan, wild and dangerous, began to form in her eyes. The contract's next stage is chakra weaving. Not just simultaneous casting, but interleaving our natures into a single technique. My theory, if I can create a matrix of my healing chakra, a scaffold, and you can fill it with your Uzumaki Kyubi energy, we might be able to create a resonant pulse that doesn't just startle the corruption, but shatters its cohesion. A controlled explosion from the inside out. You want to bomb my own arm? Naruto asked, aghast. I want to use your chakra as a resonant charge within a healing matrix. It would be like setting a shaped charge to blow a tumor apart, while my chakra contains the blast and immediately repairs the healthy tissue. She spoke faster, the medic in her seizing on the idea. But the timing, the synchronization would have to be perfect. Microsecond precision. If your energy is early, it destroys the matrix and fries my nervous system. If it's late, the corruption adapts and consumes the healing energy, making it stronger. Naruto swallowed. The risk was astronomical. And if we don't try? She held up her blackening hand. We've already seen the alternative. The warden, who had witnessed the failed healing, now rustled with a new intensity. It pointed from Tsunade to Naruto, then formed its wooden hands into a sphere, and then mimed the sphere shattering with a gentle, expanding motion. Together. Shatter the stillness. They had no better option. No time for years of practice. It was leap from a cliff, hoping their nascent resonance was enough to form wings. They spent the next cycle, marked by the warden's monitoring of the Jizo's pulsing light, in grueling, nerve-wracking preparation. They couldn't practice on her corruption, so they used the moss. Tsunade would create a tiny, complex lattice of green chakra over a patch of moss. Naruto's task was to inject a single, precisely timed thread of his gold-red energy into the exact nodal point of the lattice. The first dozen attempts were catastrophic. He was too early, vaporizing the moss and scorching the stone. He was too late, his energy fizzling uselessly after her matrix collapsed. He was off target, slicing through her chakra threads like a hot wire through silk. Tsunade's patience, worn thin by pain, frayed. Focus, you imbecile. It's not a Rasengan. It's a suture. My chakra doesn't do sutures, he yelled back, frustration boiling over. It does demolition. Then learn something new, she roared, her composure breaking. The outburst cost her, she swayed, the black veins on her neck bulging. Naruto's anger evaporated into cold fear. They took a break. Drank water. Sat in silence, the weight of her deteriorating body between them. I'm sorry, Naruto mumbled, not looking at her. Don't be sorry. Be better, she said, but the heat was gone from her voice, replaced by a deep, weary honesty. I am asking you to perform neurosurgery with a battering ram. It's unfair. It's impossible. But it is all we have. Her words, instead of discouraging him, ignited a stubborn coal. Unfair. Impossible. Those were the starting lines of his entire life. He thought of the Rasengan, of Sage Mode, of befriending Kurama. All impossible. All learned through countless failures. He stood up. Again. This time, he didn't just try to control his chakra. He listened to hers. He let the awareness exercise run in the background of his mind, feeling the rise, peak, and fall of her chakra as she built the lattice. He felt its rhythm, its texture. He stopped thinking of his energy as a separate thing and started thinking of it as the next note in a song she was singing. He waited. He felt her matrix stabilize, a perfect, humming network of green light over the moss. He felt the moment of peak cohesion, a fleeting, crystalline second of perfect order. Now. A thread of gold, no thicker than a hair, slipped from his fingertip. It didn't blast, it insinuated. It slid into the heart of her lattice. The result was not an explosion, but an eruption. The moss didn't vaporize. It bloomed. It quadrupled in size in an instant, turning a vibrant, impossible emerald, and tiny, glowing white flowers sprouted from it, releasing a scent of rain and citrus into the stale air. Tsunade stared, speechless. The warden rustled with what could only be awe. Naruto grinned, a real grin for the first time in what felt like years. Timing. She looked from the miraculous moss to him, a complex emotion in her eyes, respect, hope, and a flicker of the teacher's pride. Once is luck. Do it again. He did. 5 more times. With increasing, reliable precision. They were ready. Or as ready as they would ever be. They sat facing each other in the Jizo's strongest light. Tsunade exposed her corrupted shoulder and upper arm. The black veins stood out like a grotesque tattoo against her pallid skin. The air around it felt cold. Naruto, she said, her voice utterly calm, the voice of the surgeon about to operate on herself. The matrix will be the most complex I have ever woven. I will be building it inside my own tissues, around the corruption. I will have one chance. You will have one window. It will be smaller than any we practiced. He nodded, his mouth dry. I'll be there. She took a final, deep breath, and closed her eyes. Her left hand glowed with a concentrated, white-green light so intense it hurt to look at. She placed her fingertips on her own shoulder, just above the central mass of the corruption. Naruto slipped into the awareness state. He felt her chakra dive inward, a brilliant, brave scalpel diving into a sea of darkness. He felt her incredible focus, the monumental effort of building a structure of life within a zone of anti-life. He felt her pain, a distant, screaming background noise she had walled off. And he felt the corruption, a cold, buzzing, hungry static that recoiled and then reached for her invading light. The green lattice began to form in his senses, a fragile, glowing snowflake in a blizzard of black. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than the Rasen Shuriken. Harder than facing pain. He had to hold perfectly still, his entire being focused on that one point in her body, waiting for the signal he knew would come not as a word, but as a shift in the chakra song. The lattice grew, stabilizing. The corruption pressed in from all sides, trying to crush it. Tsunade's voice in the chakra stream was a single, pure note of strain. The moment came. A fleeting, perfect point of equilibrium where the lattice was complete and the corruption was poised to shatter it. Naruto's hand shot out. Not with force, but with the grace of a master calligrapher. A single, hair-thin filament of gold and crimson chakra, containing the essence of his will, his hope, and Kurama's defiant rage, lanced from his finger. It pierced her skin without a mark. It traveled along the path her chakra had carved. It slipped into the nodal heart of the green lattice. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, inside Tsunade's arm, a sun went off. Not an explosion of heat, but of meaning. A silent, conceptual detonation of life against oblivion. Naruto, through their bond, felt it all. The black corruption screamed, a silent, psychic shatter of crystalline structure. The interconnected network of veins shattered like glass under a sonic tone. The cold, leeching loneliness was flooded with a tsunami of warm, stubborn, chaotic selfhood. On the outside, the effect was visceral. Tsunade's body arched, a soundless cry on her lips. The black veins lit up from within with gold fire, then turned gray, then white, and then crumbled, flaking away from her skin like ash. The central mass on her shoulder ruptured, oozing a thick, tarry substance that evaporated into foul smoke before it hit the ground. The process took 10 seconds. When it was over, Tsunade slumped forward, caught by Naruto. Her right arm, from shoulder to fingertips, was laid bare. The skin was raw, red, and weeping clear plasma, like a severe burn. It was covered in a fine network of new, pink scar tissue. But it was clean. The black was gone. The necrosis was gone. The arm was alive, painful, and utterly, blessedly her own. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow but even. The deep, grinding agony that had lined her face for days was smoothed away, replaced by the clean pain of healing. Naruto held her, his own body trembling with adrenaline and relief. He looked at her scarred, living arm. They had done it. They had paid a terrible price in pain and risk, but they had bought back a piece of her. The warden approached, carrying a bowl of water and a poultice of the most vibrant green moss. It set to work, gently applying the poultice to Tsunade's new scars. Naruto sat back, watching. The hollow where Irika's memory had been still ached. The gloom still waited outside. But they had won a battle. Not with overwhelming force, but with synergy. With trust. With a perfectly timed pulse of shared defiance. He had saved his Hokage. And in doing so, he had finally begun to understand what the power of a true contract really meant. Chapter 7, Foxfire in the Fog. Tsunade's healing was a sleep of the dead. Not the gloom static death, but the profound, cellular exhaustion of a body that had just fought a war inside itself. The warden's moss poultice knit her raw flesh, reducing the weeping to a dull, pink tenderness. But her chakra coils were scorched from the internal resonance. She would be out for a while. This left Naruto alone with his thoughts, which were a dangerous place to be. The victory over the corruption was immense, but the silence of the sanctuary pressed in on him. He kept looking at her newly scarred arm, then at his own hands, the ones that had delivered the killing blow to the darkness. A fierce, protective pride swelled in him, followed by a chilling drop. She almost died. Because of this place. Because of me. The thought was a rat gnawing at the base of his skull. He needed to do something. To scout. To secure their position. The warden was a caretaker, not a fighter. The sanctum's wards were strong, but passive. Naruto's nature rebelled against passivity. "I'm going to check the perimeter," he announced to the warden, who rustled a gentle warning. "Just outside the arch. I won't go far. I need to see what's out there." The wooden creature's amber face pulsed with unease, but it did not stop him. It understood the restless fire in this one. Naruto slipped through the pearlescent ward on the main arch. The difference was immediate and brutal. The warm, granular chakra of the Jizo vanished, replaced by the damp, sucking cold of the gloom. The silence here was different from the sanctum's peace, it was a watchful, hungry quiet. The greenish aurora glow from the high ceiling provided just enough light to turn the world into a mosaic of dark green and black shapes. He moved with the stealth Irika and Kakashi had drilled into him, his sandals making no sound on the slick stone. He stuck to the edges of the large, spire-lined courtyard they'd first arrived in. His senses, heightened by the awareness training, stretched out. He felt the lingering, greasy smear of the dragging creature's path. He felt the distant, collective itch of the scribe chamber. And he felt something new, a faint, pulling drift, like a current in the air, guiding the ambient gloom energy toward the northeast corner of the courtyard. Curiosity, that old genin curse, hooked him. He followed the pull. It led to a fracture in the courtyard wall, a jagged crack wide enough to slip through, leading into a narrow canyon between two monstrous spires. Here, the fog pooled. It wasn't water vapor, but a dense, granular mist that glowed with the same sickly green as the sky. It deadened sound and shortened sight to less than 10 feet. The smell was overpowering, wet stone, ozone, and the cloying sweetness of overripe fruit just on the edge of fermentation. "This is a bad idea," Kurama's voice grumbled in his mind, clearer here away from the Jizo's pacifying influence. "Since when do you care?" Naruto muttered back, edging forward. "I don't. But your stupidity gets us both dissolved. This fog isn't natural. It's a neural static. It confuses prey." Naruto paused. He focused his chakra sense, pushing it into the fog. Kurama was right. The mist seemed to scatter his awareness, reflecting it back in broken pieces. It was like trying to see with a fractured mirror. He was about to turn back when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A whimper. High-pitched. Thin. The sound of a child, or a small animal, in pain. It came from deep within the fog, directly in line with the energy drift. Every instinct screamed trap. But another instinct, older and more deeply coded, reacted. The instinct of the boy who had been alone and hurting. The instinct of the Hokage to be. "Hello?" he called softly, his voice swallowed by the fog. "Is someone there?" The whimpering stopped. Then, a tiny, trembling voice echoed back, distorted by the mist. Help. It's dark." It was a child's voice. A Konoha accent. Naruto's blood ran cold. "It's a reflection. Like the casino. It's using your memories." "Obviously," Kurama snarled. "Turn around." But the voice spoke again, a sob catching in its throat. "Ni-san. I'm scared." The voice, it sounded like him. The young, pre-academy Naruto. The one who cried himself to sleep in an empty apartment. It was a diabolical lure. It wasn't offering treasure or power. It was offering a chance to comfort his own past. To be the savior he never had. His feet moved before his mind could veto it. He stepped deeper into the fog. "I'm here," he called, moving toward the voice. "Where are you?" "Here, over here." The voice was closer, but still directionless, echoing off the canyon walls. The fog grew thicker, the green glow intensifying until it was the only light. Shapes loomed and dissolved, vague impressions of swing sets, of empty ramen bowls, of a lonely, windowless room. The gloom was weaving a tapestry from his loneliness. Then he saw it. A small figure, hunched in the middle of the path, its back to him. Orange jacket. Spiky blonde hair. It was shaking. "Hey," Naruto said, his throat tight. He took a step closer. "It's okay. I'm here." The small figure stopped shaking. It slowly began to turn its head. Not all the way. Just a profile. It had his face. But the eyes were wrong. They were the solid, silver-tainted eyes of the scribes, weeping those oily tears. "Ni-san," the reflection said, its voice now flat, devoid of the earlier tremor. "You left me all alone." Naruto's heart hammered against his ribs. "I didn't. I'm here now." "You're always leaving," the thing said, rising to its feet. Its movements were jerky, puppet-like. "You leave to get stronger. You leave to save everyone else. You left me in the dark." As it spoke, its form began to blur. Another identical figure peeled off from its side, then another, and another. In seconds, a dozen small, crying Naruto surrounded him, their silver eyes fixed on him, their voices a discordant chorus. "Why don't you ever stay? Why does everyone else matter more?" The guilt was a physical weight, crushing his lungs. The gloom wasn't attacking with claws, it was drowning him in his own perceived failures. The fog pressed closer, amplifying the whispers, making them feel like his own thoughts. "You failed Sasuke, you couldn't save Jiraiya fast enough, you got Tsunade infected. You're a fraud. A loud, useless fraud who gets by on borrowed power. Fight it, you idiot." Kurama roared, but the fox's voice was distant, muffled by the psychic onslaught. One of the reflections reached out a small, pale hand. "If you're really here, hold my hand, Nii-san. Make the dark go away." The part of Naruto that was pure, wounded child yearned to do it. To finally comfort that lonely boy. But he had met that boy. He had become that boy. And that boy, for all his pain, never gave up. Never surrendered to the darkness. He clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms. The pain was an anchor. "No," he growled. The reflections paused. "No? You're not me," Naruto said, his voice gaining strength. "I was lonely. I was sad. But I never stopped believing I'd find my light. I never became this." He gestured at their weeping silver eyes. "My pain didn't make me want to make others hurt. It made me want to make sure no one else felt that way." The reflections' faces twisted from sorrow into something blank and furious. Their mouths opened too wide. "Then you are useless to us," they hissed in unison. "You will be stillness." They lunged, not as children, but as liquid silver blurs, their forms elongating into sharp, needle-like projectiles aimed at his heart. Instinct took over. Naruto crossed his arms in front of him. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A ring of shadow clones erupted around him just as the needle struck. The clones took the hits, popping in clouds of smoke that mixed with the green fog. But the real Naruto was already moving, leaping straight up the canyon wall. Their illusions with physical form. He needed area. He needed to burn away this fog. "Use my chakra," Kurama growled, no longer hesitant. This emotional filth, it insults us both. Burn it clean. Naruto landed on a rocky outcrop halfway up the spire. Below, the silver liquid reflections were pooling together, forming a larger, shapeless mass that began to flow up the wall after him. He closed his eyes. Not in meditation, but in focus. He reached for the rage, the defiant, crimson fire of the Nine Tails. But he didn't let it consume him. He thought of Tsunade's lattice. Of precision. He couldn't just be a wildfire here. He had to be a controlled burn. He slammed his palm against the stone of the outcrop. Not to attack the creature, but to use the stone as a conduit. Foxfire art, crimson diffusion. He didn't release the chakra in a wave. He pushed it into the stone, a network of red-gold veins that spread rapidly through the rock of the canyon walls and floor. Where his chakra traveled, the green, psychic fog repelled, sizzling away as if from a hot iron. The shapeless silver mass below shrieked, its form destabilizing as the fog that gave it cohesion was burned back. It tried to reform, to flee deeper into the remaining mist. Naruto wasn't done. He focused the chakra network in the stone to a point directly beneath the creature. Now, Kurama. From the stone, a geyser of pure, crimson chakra erupted, not as a blast, but as a containment field, a swirling pillar of foxfire that engulfed the silver mass. The shriek became a fading, microwave whine. Within the crimson pillar, the gloom construct didn't explode. It unraveled, its stolen emotional resonance and false memory scoured away into nothingness. The last of the green fog in the canyon evaporated, revealing the stark, black stone. The foxfire pillar died down. Naruto dropped to the now clean floor, panting. The canyon was silent, just stone and the distant aurora. The psychic pressure was gone. But he'd made a lot of noise. Used a lot of chakra. From the entrance to the courtyard, a new sound answered. Not a whimper. A guttural, clicking chitter. Lots of them. He turned. Emerging from the archway and from other cracks in the walls were creatures that looked like the flying hands, but complete. They were emaciated, humanoid figures with skin like stretched parchment, moving on all fours with disturbing, insectal speed. Their heads were featureless except for wide, gaping maws lined with needle teeth. They were drawn to the beacon of his foxfire, to the vibrant life he'd just flared. The pack. Dozens of them. He was far from the sanctuary. Outnumbered. Tsunade was unconscious. For a second, panic gripped him. Then, the lessons of the last few cycles hardened into a plan. He couldn't fight them all head-on. Not here. He formed a single cross seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 100 clones materialized in the canyon, a sea of orange and blonde. Cause chaos, the real Naruto yelled. Lead them away from the sanctum. Meet at the scribe chamber if you can. Go. The clones hooped, a deliberately loud, raucous noise. They didn't attack as one, they scattered in every direction, 100 brilliant chakra signatures splitting up, shouting, throwing the occasional Rasengan at the walls to create dust and confusion. The pack of chittering horrors hesitated, their simple minds overwhelmed by the sudden explosion of targets. Then, with shrieks of frustration, they split up, giving chase to the decoys. The real Naruto didn't join the chaos. He dropped all chakra signature, pulling his energy in tight, imagining himself as a stone, as nothing. He used the dust and confusion to slip, silent and unseen, back along the canyon wall, into the courtyard, and toward the sanctum's arch. He slipped through the ward just as the sounds of distant, chaotic battle echoed through the stone, the pops of clones dispelling, the shrieks of the pack, the occasional muffled explosion. He collapsed against the inside wall, his breath coming in gasps. He was safe. But he'd drawn attention. He'd used Kurama's power as a lighthouse. The warden stood nearby, its amber face glowing softly. It didn't chide. It simply observed. Naruto looked over at Tsunade, still sleeping peacefully, her scarred arm now showing healthy pink under the moss. He had protected the sanctum. He had protected her. But at a cost. The gloom now knew a powerful, defiant energy was here. And it had felt the fox's fire. He had won the skirmish in the fog. But he may have started a war. They know we're here now, Kurama said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Good. Let them come. This stillness could use some noise. Naruto didn't share the bravado. He felt the weight of leadership, of being the sole protector. He finally understood a fraction of what Tsunade had carried for years. It was a heavy, lonely feeling. But he wasn't alone. He had her, sleeping. He had the warden. And he had a contract to finish learning. The next time the gloom came knocking, they would answer the door together. Chapter 8, The First Fusion. The aftermath of the Foxfire was a tense, silent vigil. Naruto's clones, one by one, dispelled in his mind, returning impressions of being run down in dark tunnels, dissolved by grasping claws, or leading pursuers on wild chases to dead ends. Each pop was a flinch, a tiny drain on his reserves and his spirit. But the tactic had worked. No chittering horrors came near the sanctum's arch. The gloom had been given other, brighter fires to chase. When the last clone vanished, bringing the final report of a pack losing interest and slinking back into deeper shadows, Naruto allowed himself to slump. The mental and chakra fatigue was deep, but a fiercer energy buzzed beneath it, the adrenaline of a close call, and the cold understanding that they were no longer hidden. Tsunade stirred as the distant psychic echoes of the Foxfire battle faded. She didn't wake with a start, but with a slow, groggy return to consciousness, as if swimming up from the bottom of a deep, warm well. Her eyes blinked open, focusing first on the Jizo's gentle, golden light, then on Naruto sitting watchful beside her. For a long moment, she simply took inventory. She flexed the fingers of her right hand. A sharp, clean pain lanced from her shoulder to her fingertips, the pain of living nerves and regenerating muscle, a symphony of sensation after the terrible, cold void of the corruption. She looked at the arm, now swathed in the warden's fresh moss poultice, the angry red of new scar tissue peeking through. She took a deep, experimental breath. The wet, clicking rasp in her lung was gone. The weight in her chest, both physical and metaphysical, had lifted. She sat up, movement stiff but under her own power. "Report," she said, her voice rusty but firm. Naruto didn't sugarcoat it. He told her about the fog, the child echo lure, the psychological assault, and his tactical use of clones and Foxfire to scatter the responding pack. He left out the depth of the guilt trap's pull, but the shadows in his eyes told the story well enough. Tsunade listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a minute, absorbing it all. "You used a beacon to draw them away from a stronger position. Sound tactics. Reckless execution." She finally looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the fatigue and the residual adrenaline jitter in his hands. "But you held the line. Thank you." The simple acknowledgement, devoid of sarcasm or lecture, hit him harder than any praise. He just nodded, swallowing past a sudden tightness in his throat. "The corruption is gone," she stated, more to herself than to him, rotating her shoulder with a wince. "The arm is weak. Atrophied. I'd estimate I have 30% grip strength, 0 chakra fine motor control in it. It's a liability in a fight." She met his gaze. "Which means we can't afford another standoff like that. The next probe will be stronger. They now know we can fight back, and with significant power. They will adapt." She pushed herself fully upright, wincing but pushing through it. "We need the next stage of the contract. Now. Not just awareness, or weaving. We need a force multiplier. We need a fusion technique." Naruto remembered the scroll's diagrams, the two spirals becoming one radiant sphere. "The complete merger? You said that was the work of a lifetime." "A lifetime we no longer have," she shot back, her old fire returning. "We have the foundation. We have shared a resonant pulse that purged a systemic corruption. That's more than most pairs achieve in years. The scroll said it's learned in the doing, in necessity." She stood, testing her weight on her legs. "Our necessity is currently knocking at the door, wondering where all the noise came from." The warden, who had been observing, rustled forward. It placed a wooden hand on the Uzumaki contract scroll, which lay open on the dais. It pointed to a specific passage following the chakra weaving exercises. The text described not a single technique, but a principle, the resonant avatar. A temporary, synergistic state where two chakra systems could overlap and amplify each other, creating a shared avatar of power without full spiritual fusion. It was less stable, less powerful than a true merger, but far more achievable, a stepping stone built for wartime. "A resonant avatar," Tsunade read aloud, her eyes scanning the complex chakra flow diagrams. "It's like holding a sustained, collaborative Kekkei Genkai. Each person maintains their own consciousness and body, but their chakra fields intertwine, allowing for seamless, amplified joint techniques. The key is a shared emotional anchor, a memory, a belief, so strong it harmonizes their wavelengths." Naruto scratched his head. "A shared memory? We don't have a lot of happy picnics, Bachan." "No," she agreed, her voice softening slightly. "But we have a shared determination. A shared promise." She looked at him. "You want to be Hokage. To protect the village. I am Hokage. It is my life's duty to protect it. That vow, it's the same. The weight is the same. The love is the same. That could be our anchor." It was true. In all their bickering, in all their differences of style and generation, that core was identical. The will of fire wasn't just a phrase, it was the furnace that powered them both. Okay, Naruto said, conviction solidifying. What do we do? The training that followed made the chakra-weaving exercises look like child's play. They returned to facing each other in the Jizo's light. This time, they weren't to monitor or weave, but to synchronize their entire chakra output to a single, shared rhythm, using their Hokage vow as the metronome. It was madness. Naruto's chakra was a crashing, irregular wave. Tsunade's was a steady, powerful tide. Trying to make them beat as one was like trying to sync a thunderstorm to a heartbeat. For hours, they failed. Their chakra would clash, creating discordant sparks that stung the air. Naruto would get overeager and surge ahead, Tsunade, still weak, would falter and drop the rhythm. The warden watched, its amber light pulsing patiently. Frustration mounted. I can't be this precise. Naruto finally exploded, slamming a fist on the stone. It's not how I'm built. Then rebuild yourself. Tsunade snapped, sweat beading on her brow from the strain. 5 minutes. That's all we need. 5 minutes of perfect harmony to establish the avatar state. Is your will to protect Konoha so weak it can't focus for 5 minutes? Her words were a spark to tinder. Not anger, but a challenge to his very core. It's not weak, he roared, his chakra flaring gold in response. Then prove it. Stop trying to match me. Match the vow. Feel it. The promise you made over Jiraiya's body. The promise I made over my brothers. The same promise. Stop listening to my chakra and listen to that. He closed his eyes, shutting out her physical form, the sanctum, the gloom. He dove inward, past the fatigue, past the frustration. He found the image that was his compass, a Konoha not in ruins, but vibrant and safe. The faces of Irika, the memory faded but the love still there, Kakashi, Sakura, Hinata, all of them living in peace because he held the line. He felt the weight of the Hokage's hat, not as a prize, but as a shield. And he felt, resonating from across from him, an identical weight, an identical love, borne by a woman who had carried it for decades through blood and loss. His chakra didn't calm. It oriented. It stopped being a chaotic wave and became a directed current, powerful and purposeful, flowing toward a single, shared point. Across from him, Tsunade felt the shift. She let go of trying to control the synchronization and instead anchored herself in her own version of the vow, not just the village, but the next generation it held. The spiky-haired, frustrating, brilliant boy in front of her was its embodiment. Protecting him was protecting the future. Her chakra, precise and resilient, aligned itself not to a rhythm, but to a purpose that perfectly dovetailed with his. There was no grand flash of light. No thunderclap. The air between them simply thickened. Began to hum with a low, potent frequency. A visible haze of mingled gold and green energy shimmered into existence, linking their bodies. Naruto could feel Tsunade's chakra not as a separate thing, but as an extension of his own will, a surgical scalpel attached to his hammer. Tsunade felt Naruto's power as a boundless reservoir she could draw upon without strain, a furnace to fuel her techniques. They opened their eyes. The world was different. Not through shared vision, but through shared perception. Naruto could feel the minute tremors in Tsunade's healing muscles. Tsunade could feel the restless, protective simmer of Kurama's energy in Naruto's gut. They were two instruments playing the same song. Now, Tsunade said, her voice echoing slightly in the resonant field. A test. A simple one. A combined defensive technique. I'll provide the matrix. You provide the force. She raised her good left hand. A complex, three-dimensional shield of green hexagonal chakra plates began to form in front of her, a smaller version of her Byakugo release technique. But it was slow, patchy, her reserves still low. Naruto didn't need instruction. He understood. He raised his right hand toward the forming shield. He didn't push chakra at it. He pushed chakra into its structure, following the pathways Tsunade was creating in real time, reinforcing every plate, every seam. The result was instantaneous. The half-formed, fragile shield snapped into perfect, blazing solidity. It was no longer just green. It was a brilliant, swirling vortex of gold and green energy, humming with such density that the stone beneath it groaned. It was smaller than Tsunade's usual shields, but it felt absolute. The warden, standing nearby, reached out a wooden finger and tapped the shield. There was no sound. The finger did not bounce off. The section of the shield it touched flared, and the warden's fingertip blackened and smoked, as if briefly exposed to a star's corona. The creature withdrew its hand, not in pain, but in clear, rustling astonishment. Tsunade let the shield dissipate. The resonant field wavered but held. She looked at Naruto, a wild, triumphant light in her eyes he'd never seen before. Do you feel that? The efficiency. My chakra use was cut by 70% for a shield twice as strong. Naruto was grinning, the shared exhilaration buzzing through him like electricity. It's like I knew exactly where to put the power. Like you were drawing a blueprint in my mind. That's the avatar state, she said, breathing heavily but smiling fiercely. Shared intent. Shared execution. It won't last long. The strain of maintaining perfect harmony is immense on the mind. But for a short battle, it could change everything. They practiced maintaining the state, moving together in the small chamber. They attempted a simple tandem strike, Tsunade throwing a punch enhanced by Naruto's velocity chakra. The result sent a shockwave through the sanctum that made the Jizo's bell chime frantically and cracked the stone floor where her fist was aimed, and pulled up short. The force was terrifying, effortless. After 20 minutes, the mental strain began to tell. A headache spiked behind Naruto's eyes. Tsunade's focus wavered, the shared perception blurring into static. They let the resonant field drop simultaneously, the severance leaving them both gasping as if surfacing from deep water, their senses abruptly shrinking back to the confines of their own skulls. They sat, panting, sweat-drenched, but exhilarated. We have it, Tsunade said, her voice hushed with awe. A true fusion technique. Not a jutsu. A state. Naruto nodded, rubbing his temples. My head feels like I tried to do all of Shikamaru's strategies at once. But, we did it. They had turned a corner. From hunted, wounded refugees, they had become a nascent, synergistic weapon. The gloom had sensed a fox's fire. Soon, it would meet the combined, focused inferno of a Hokage's resolve and a Jinchuriki's will. The sanctum felt different now. Not just a sanctuary, but a forge. And they had just tempered their first real blade together. Chapter 9, The Carnival of Regrets. The resonant avatar was a fledgling power, a newborn star in their chests, but it was untested. They spent the next cycle, marked by the warden's rhythmic tending of the Jizo's moss, in grueling, short-burst training, flaring the avatar state for a minute, performing a single combined action, and collapsing from the psychic strain. They learned its limits, the headache that came after 3 minutes, the disorientation if their shared focus broke, the way Tsunade's healing chakra could now, in resonance, soothe Naruto's chakra burns almost as fast as he could make them. It was during one such recovery period, as they sat sharing water and bland moss paste, that the sanctum's peace was broken not by a sound, but by a scent. It drifted through the main archway, past their reinforced ward, the smell of roasting peanuts, spun sugar, and grease paint. The unmistakable, cloying aroma of a festival. Underneath it was the fainter, metallic scent of rust and damp sawdust. Naruto and Tsunade exchanged a glance. A trap. It had to be. But the scent was so specific, so potently tied to memory. For Naruto, it was the summer festivals in Konoha, the rare nights of childhood belonging, the glow of paper lanterns. For Tsunade, it was the bustling carnivals of traveling performers, a distraction from grief, the dizzying whirl of noise and chants. The warden rustled in clear agitation, pointing emphatically at the scroll and then at them, its meaning a warning: do not go. It is a narrative snare. But the scent grew stronger, and with it came a sound, the distant, off-key jangle of a calliope, playing a tune that was both familiar and deeply wrong, like a lullaby played on broken teeth. It's not going to stop, Naruto said, his voice low. It's calling us. Using what we want to see. It's a carnival, Tsunade stated, her eyes distant. A place of distraction, of cheap thrills, of forgetting. She looked at her scarred arm, then at Naruto. It's targeting our nostalgia. Our desire for a simpler time. Before this. So we ignore it. Can we? She asked, not rhetorically. If it's this strong here, inside the wards, it has significant power. It could be drawing on other lost souls, growing. It might move. Or it might find a way to weaken the Jizo's field by feeding on our suppressed longing. The gloom attacks in action as surely as action. She stood, a new, grim resolve settling on her features. We don't ignore it. We confront it. But not as victims. As surgeons. We go in with the avatar state active, our shared vow as our scalpel. We excise this tumor of nostalgia before it can metastasize. It was a risk. A huge one. But the logic was sound. In this world, passive defense was a slow death. They prepared. They ate. They focused. At the archway, they didn't drop the ward. Instead, they stood side by side, hands nearly touching. On three, Tsunade said. Anchor, the will of fire. Not the memory of it. The present duty of it. Ready? Naruto nodded, pushing all thoughts of happy festivals from his mind, replacing them with the image of Konoha's gates needing defense, of his people counting on him. Ready. 1. 2. 3. They triggered the resonant avatar. The shimmering gold-green haze enveloped them. The world snapped into hyperclarity. The smell of the carnival became overpowering, a sensory weapon. But within the resonance, they could also perceive its composition, layers of stolen joy, synthetic sweetness over a core of despair. They stepped through the archway together. The courtyard was gone. In its place was a carnival midway, but one pitched in a perpetual, sour twilight. Paper lanterns glowed with the same green aurora light. Tents of faded, striped canvas sagged. Game stalls offered impossible prizes, vials of clear memory, tiny, beating hearts of light, locks of hair from lost loved ones. The calliope sat in the center, a monstrous, pipe-covered thing that played itself, its keys pressed by invisible, skeletal fingers. And there were patrons. Not shadows this time, but faded echoes. Translucent figures in old-fashioned Konoha attire, their faces smudged and featureless, drifting from stall to stall with listless, repeating motions. The air thrummed with a low-grade, collective sadness. A ticket booth stood before them. Inside sat a figure in a ringmaster's coat, but the coat was moth-eaten and stained. Its face was a porcelain mannequin's mask, cracked across one cheek, with a painted, exaggerated smile. Its eyes were hollow black pits. "Welcome, welcome," it cried, its voice a grating recording of multiple voices layered together. "Step right up. The carnival of regrets is always open. For one low price, a cherished memory, you can ride the carousel of what if. You can win back a lost moment at the bottle toss. You can see departed loved ones in the hall of mirrors." Its blank eyes seemed to fix on them, seeing through the resonant haze. "Ah. But you have a combined ticket. How novel. A 2-for-1 special. Which memory will you spend? The boy's first ramen? The lady's last win?" "We're not here to play," Tsunade's voice echoed, amplified by the resonance, cutting through the calliope's drone. The ringmaster's smile didn't move. "Everyone plays. Nostalgia is the currency of the stagnant. You reek of it. You cling to a past that is gone. We simply help you visit it. One last time." It gestured a white-gloved hand. To their left, a curtain of beads parted. Beyond, Naruto saw a familiar training ground. A younger, sullen Sasuke sat on a swing. The memory was perfect, vivid, the dappled sunlight, the smell of grass. His own younger self was there, offering a rivalry that was still pure. The ache to step into that scene, to try one more time to say the right thing, was a physical pull. To their right, another curtain opened. Tsunade saw a cozy, sunlit room. A young, dark-haired Dan was laughing, teaching a little Nawaki how to hold a shuriken. The love and safety in that room were a palpable warmth. The carnival was weaponizing their deepest, most private regrets of things left unsaid, paths not taken. Naruto felt the resonance waver as Tsunade's focus was violently tugged toward the memory of Dan. He felt a surge of her old, bottomless grief, sharp as the day it was fresh. "Anchor," he thought shouted through the bond, pouring his own unwavering present focus into the link. "They're not here. Konoha is. Now." Tsunade shuddered, the wave of grief receding, forced back by the shared purpose. Her side of the resonance hardened, turning from sorrow to cold, protective fury. "We reject the past you're selling," she declared, her and Naruto's voices blending at the edges. "Our duty is to the present." The ringmaster's painted smile seemed to tighten. "A pity. Then you are of no value as patrons. Only as exhibits." It clapped its gloved hands. The faded echo patients turned as one. Their featureless faces swiveled toward Naruto and Tsunade. And they began to change. Their forms melted and reformed, taking on familiar shapes. From the crowd, a translucent, glowing Minato and Kushina stepped forward, smiling sadly. "Naruto, why won't you stay with us?" Kushina's echo whispered, her voice a heartbreak of static. Another figure coalesced into Jiraiya, his back turned, walking away into the green gloom. "So many unfinished stories," Tsunade, his echo sighed, the sound of rustling pages. More followed, Irika, Shizune, Sakura, all wearing expressions of profound disappointment. "You left us. You failed us. You're not strong enough." It was the casino's guilt trap, amplified 100-fold, made flesh by stolen emotional residue. The psychic pressure was a wall of despair meant to crush their will, to make them submit to the easier pain of regret. Inside the resonant avatar, the assault was a roaring tempest. But the bond was also a lifeline. Naruto felt Tsunade's guilt, Dan, Nawaki, Jiraiya, as a crushing wave, but he also felt her core, the Hokage who had borne that guilt and fought on regardless. He anchored her with the image of her standing defiant on the village walls. She, in turn, felt his raw, orphan's anguish at the phantom parents, but she also felt the unbreakable spirit that had turned that loneliness into a vow to protect everyone's family. She anchored him with the memory of him facing down pain, the savior of Konoha. They didn't break. They stood, back to back within their shared energy field, the gold and green light blazing brighter against the psychic gloom. "They're not real," Naruto growled, the words vibrating through both of them. "Our real people are waiting for us to come home." "These are ghosts we've already made peace with," Tsunade added, her voice like steel. "By living. By continuing." The ringmaster shrieked, a sound of tearing metal. The echo figures flickered, their forms becoming grotesque, their sad expressions twisting into masks of rage. They charged, no longer phantoms, but solid constructs of regret made manifest. The battle was joined. Naruto didn't fight alone. He moved, and Tsunade moved with him, not in unison, but in perfect complement. When a phantom Jiraiya lunged with a Rasengan, Naruto didn't block it. He diverted it with a swipe of his own Rasengan, creating an opening Tsunade instantly filled, her good fist, augmented by his chakra, shattering the construct with a punch that released a shower of pages and the smell of old ink. When Phantom Minato tried a body flicker stab, Tsunade's perception, shared with Naruto, predicted the endpoint. A wall of hexagonal gold-green chakra plates, their combined shield, sprang up to block it, and Naruto followed up with a point-blank Rasengan that dissolved the figure into yellow sparks. They were a machine. Tsunade's tactical genius directed the flow, Naruto's boundless power and instinct executed it. He felt her strategies forming in the shared space a second before she did. She felt his explosive reactions and wove them into the battle plan seamlessly. But the carnival was endless. For every construct they destroyed, two more formed from the mist. The ringmaster stood by its calliope, conducting the assault with wide, frantic gestures. "We have to take out the source," Tsunade thought, the concept flashing through their bond. "The calliope. It's the engine generating the narrative." Naruto saw the plan instantly. A diversion and a strike. "On my mark." He broke from her side, a gold and green blur, tearing a path directly through a cluster of phantoms toward the ringmaster, drawing the focus of the horde. Tsunade held her ground, a fortress. As the constructs turned to pursue Naruto, she slammed her palms to the sawdust-covered ground. "Doton, Yomi Numa." But it wasn't just her chakra. Naruto's potent earth-nature energy, flowing through the resonance, supercharged it. The ground didn't just become mud, it became a churning, grasping quagmire of gold-green energy that swallowed a dozen phantoms whole, their forms dissolving with muffled cries. The ringmaster, distracted by Naruto's furious approach, turned to face him, raising its hands to summon a new wave of defenses. It never saw Tsunade. Using the distraction, she had already moved. Not toward the ringmaster, but toward the massive, pipe-covered calliope. With Naruto's chakra roaring through her, she didn't form a fist. She formed a spear. A concentrated drill of spiraling green-gold chakra extended from her good hand, humming with devastating, focused resonance. Mystical palm art, resonance lancet. She drove the chakra spear not into the pipes, but into the calliope's central cabinet, the heart of the mechanism. There was a sound like a universe gasping. The calliope's off-key tune screeched into a deafening feedback whine. The pipework shuddered, then began to unravel, not into wood and metal, but into strands of meaningless, colored light and discordant sound. The green lanterns flickered and died. The ringmaster screamed, a raw, broken sound. It clutched its chest as cracks spread across its porcelain mask. The melody. The entire carnival wavered. The tents faded to gossamer. The stalls dissolved. The phantom constructs froze, then crumbled into piles of glittering, melancholic dust. The ringmaster collapsed, its form shrinking, the ringmaster coat dissolving to reveal a small, pathetic creature, a scribe, but one dressed in tattered bunting, its bone stylus now a broken conductor's baton. It whimpered, trying to scribble in the air, but producing only feeble, fading sparks. Naruto stood over it, Rasengan ready. Tsunade approached, the resonant field still humming around them, her expression grim. "You ruined the song," the creature wept, its blank face tilted upward. "It was all I had, all any of us had, the memory of joy." Tsunade looked at the piles of dust that were once echoes. She felt, through the resonance, the vast, hollow sadness that had fueled this place. It wasn't evil. It was a tomb for forgotten happiness. The past is not a place to live, she said, her voice quiet but firm within the shared space. It's a foundation to build on. You are building a prison. She raised her hand, not to strike, but to release a pulse of pure, green healing chakra, amplified by Naruto's unwavering will. It washed over the broken scribe ringmaster. The creature didn't die. It sighed. Its form relaxed. The tattered bunting fell away. It became simply a scribe again, but one that sat peacefully, its bone stylus dropping to the ground. It would return to its endless, meaningless recording, but the compulsive, sorrowful melody was gone. The carnival was gone. They stood back in the stark courtyard, the Jizo's archway visible ahead. The only remnant was the scent of peanuts and sugar, rapidly fading. They let the resonant avatar drop. The separation was a physical shock, leaving them both panting, leaning against each other for support. The mental exhaustion was profound, but so was the victory. They had not just survived a psychological onslaught. They had dismantled it. Together. As they stumbled back toward the sanctum, Naruto looked at Tsunade. Surgery, huh? She managed a tired, real smirk. Precise excision. No collateral damage to the patient. She glanced back at where the carnival had been. We're getting better at this. He nodded. They weren't just surviving the gloom anymore. They were learning to cure its sicknesses. One painful, resonant step at a time.